In conversation with Selena Brown. Selena Brown is an accomplished author, astute marketing consultant, an adept event producer, raised by a black British mother, a Jamaican granny. Selena cultivated a profound affinity for words from an early age. Her journey is marked by exceptional achievement, having assumed the role of youth MP for Nottingham at the age of 16 and obtaining 2 degrees and a master's by the age of 21. Her professional trajectory has encompassed pivotal roles at esteemed organizations such as the BBC, MTV, and Fraud Communication, with work experience spanning across New York, Kenya, and Gambia. Committed to diversity and with a remarkable presence in Birmingham's creative landscape for over 2 decades, Selena is passionate about promoting inclusivity and artistic expression. Amidst the challenges posed by the pandemic, Selena demonstrated her versatility by authoring the cherished children's book Nena series. In 2020, she established the Black British Book Festival, an embodiment of a visionary commitment to celebrate the vibrancy of Black British literature. This distinguished festival, heralded as Europe's largest Black literature festival, partnered with the esteemed Southbank Centre in 2023 and received sponsorship for influential brand publishing and titles, including Audible, Pan Macmillan, Archett, Simon Shooter, National Express, and Penguin. Selena's indomitable spirit and devotion to her craft have garnered widespread recognition, drawing enthusiastic engagement from a diverse audience eager to embrace the richness of the Black British literary voice. And in today's episode of our interview, it's my utmost pleasure, joy and excitement to have on the show today, Selena Brown. Welcome on the show, Selena. How are you doing today?
I'm amazing. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to speak to you today.
Quite beautiful and quite awesome. Now I wanted to ask you, how does your work in uplifting Black voices connect with the stories you want to tell for children, if in any way?
I normally say that I wear two separate hats. And so I am an author, and I'm a children's author, and I'm also the founder of the Black British Book Festival. What's actually happened is because I was struggling as an author, and so basically when my first book that I published is called Nina the Green Juice. It's about a little girl that makes a green juice for the first time. It was a self-published book.
Yeah.
And when I went to find distribution for the book, I was told by somebody in the industry that the book wouldn't sell because it had a little black girl with an afro on the cover and nobody would buy that book.
Wow.
Somebody told me that in 2021. I was like, what? So I spoke to other Black authors, authors from diverse Black backgrounds, and this was a typical kind of comments that were being said within the industry. And I was like, wow, is this really happening in big 2021? And it was. And so on the back of that, that's why I started the Black British Book Festival. It was in direct response to the challenges that were faced in our community when it came to literature festivals, when it came to visibility, when it came to acquiring books. I wanted the organization, an entity, a safe space for us to be able to really celebrate our voice and elevate them and give visibility to them. And so that's how that came about. So it influenced it. And so currently I separate the two entities, or the two parts of myself, should I say. So I am an author, I'm also a founder. They don't, I suppose they do cross over. So when self-published authors come to me and talk to me about their issues with self-publishing, I can relate because I'm a self-published author.
Yeah.
When authors come to me that are traditionally published and say, these are the successes and these are the challenges, again, I can relate.
Yeah.
And so the information that I gather, I'm very, very privileged and I'm very, very honored to have a deal, have a literary agent. There was a whole journey to me getting published. There was a whole journey to me getting a literary agent. There's been a whole journey with me building the festival and having to work with certain brands and organizations. And so I'm able to feed that information, that knowledge back to the people, back to emerging authors, back to those that want to be script writers, back, I've been able to galvanize information because certain doors have been opened to me. And I'm very, very, very honored to be able to do that. And so that's how I'm able to now say, okay, cool, that challenge happened with me. when I was traditionally published. Let me create a course around that. Let me have a panel event at the festival around that.
Yeah.
Let me contact other publishers to see if we can have an academy or a summit around that. And so I use the information that I've gathered and also information from other authors to feed that information into the festival to make it even more powerful and even more relatable. Because sometimes what happens is that courses are created, events are created that have no real connection. It's kind of just a guess that this is what people want, but we want authentic things, a real impactful thing that can
Absolutely.
actually make a difference. And that's why you have to go to the source, to the people, and actually deal with real life issues and start from there. So that's how they interconnect.
Well, I must say, hearing you talk about the background, the starting point towards the Black British Book Festival is so motivating and so inspiring that you have to like, oh wow, so somebody said this that it wouldn't go much further because there was a black in front of the cover, and nobody's gonna be like, "Oh, okay, really?" So there's this sort of, if I should use the word, will I say discrimination, or there's this sort of stigma, yeah, against book of this nature. And you thought, okay, I would love to start, something, a safe space where people can come together. That is such an amazing, very lovely, quite impressive, and quite commendable thing to start. And I
Thank you.
mean, fast forward since then till now, it has grown massively. A huge congratulations again. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
That's an amazing community. I was very excited and quite impressed to be there, the last one, and I'm looking forward to the upcoming one as well, really.
Yeah, so it's on the next one's the 19th of October at the
Yeah.
Barbican Centre. But a lot of people know us from the festivals because obviously it's in our title. And so we typically do around 3 festivals a year. So we did the
Mm.
one in Manchester. We take over the whole of Manchester Central Library. We do it at the Barbican, typically in October. And then we do a children's festival in Birmingham, and we did it in March of this year. And Lenny
Wow.
Henry headlined that festival. We had 210 children attend that festival.
Mm.
And we specifically chose schools. It was free to attend for the students. We all subsidized everything. We
Mm.
chose schools that had high free school meals and low literacy rates. We take it for granted that everybody has books in their houses in the UK.
Mm.
Some people don't, and so we made
Wow.
sure that children left with 5 books each to start their
Mm.
own library. And to me, that meant so much. And so we do
Mm.
other festivals there. We also curate. So we curate for Glastonbury. We're going to
Mm.
Glastonbury this Friday. We're bringing Zadie Smith there.
Wow.
We curate for Cheltenham. We curate for Hay. We curate for We Out Here. So there's several different festivals that we curate.
Wow.
Three-Man Festival in Wales. There's so many different festivals that we curate for.
Mm.
We do programs. So we work with Paramount, we work with Pan Macmillan to create summits and programs that
Mm.
demystify the industry and open doors for people. We have a library in Croydon, a community library in Croydon on the
Wow.
24th of July. We're about to open our second library in Lewisham. Again, these
Interesting.
are community, because there's so many libraries that are closing down. And so we
Mm.
really want to leave a legacy of work. So we're
Mm.
starting libraries. We go into schools on a regular basis. We have a team of people that go into schools and tour Black authors within schools across the UK. So
Mm.
this summer already, we've done Wolverhampton, we've done Birmingham, we've done Luton, we've done Peterborough, we've done Liverpool, we've done
Wow.
Manchester. So we're not playing, we're nationwide. And so
Mm.
that's just a small look at the work that we do.
Mm.
And we love what we do. We absolutely love what we do. It's from the heart, it's from passion. I have an amazing team of 6 people that currently work alongside me as well. So I'm
Mm.
very, very, very honored to be able to employ people as well. So yeah, it's great. It's absolutely amazing.
That is such an amazing one, really. I feel so excited you're talking about it. That's so beautiful. And I'm very impressed by it. And I'm sure the viewers also in English literature will be very excited to hear and get to know about this. Quite beautiful, really. And just apart from the books we've mentioned so far, do you have any other works you've authored or say currently working on?
So what happened is I have a 2 book deal with Penguin. And so
Oh,
the other manuscript again was written in like 2021, 2022.
wow.
And so we're revisiting that in a couple of weeks in order for that to be released next year. So I'm really
Mm.
excited about that. I'm always writing. People are like, how do you? I've also got 3 kids as well, and so
Wow.
I'm a mother as well, and I've got these amazing, like, this amazing organization in my writing career. But in the midst of all of that, I just love writing. It brings me peace.
Mm,
I'm able just to kind of be in a world where anything can go and anything can happen,
absolutely.
and anybody can say anything at any time, especially with
Mm,
children's books. I can go
yeah.
to Timbuktu and then I can go back to space and then I can be, it's like it's boundless. Anything can happen, and so it's
Mm,
amazing to be able to tap into that energy. It's so much
yeah.
for me. And so yeah,
Right.
I'm about to send some books over to my lit agent, and then we'll see what happens with that. But yeah,
Wow.
I'm just enjoying the space that I'm in terms of creating. It just feeds my soul. It literally feeds
Mm,
my soul, honestly. Just writing feeds my
wow.
soul.
That is so impressive. That's so motivational. That's so inspiring, and that's so amazing to know. And I'm sure, just as I'm inspired, the viewers as well are inspired. And just in case we have some viewers who are watching this interview, I would love to get a copy of My Rice is Best and your other book. On what platform are they available on for purchase?
I mean, you can buy anywhere online. You can walk into Waterstones on your local high street and pick up the book. You
Mm,
can shop online an independent bookshop. You can go to Amazon, like it's everywhere. Just type in Selena Brown, My Rice is Best. Yeah, and grab yourself
mm,
a copy. You will not be
beautiful cover as
disappointed.
well.
You can also check me out on social media at the
Yeah.
Selena Brown on all platforms, Twitter, Instagram,
Mm,
TikTok. I am there. Also,
wow.
check out the Black British Book Festival. Please join our newsletter on our website and you can keep up to
Mm,
date with everything. And what we also offer as part of the Black British Book Festival is a free community group, because sometimes as authors we work alone a lot, and we need that support. And so we have nearly 400 people in our WhatsApp group, and that's
mm,
just made up of just emerging authors, established authors, all sharing opportunities and
mm.
stuff. So please check out our Instagram and find the link to join our WhatsApp group and join the conversation and get some inspiration.
The Katherine Massey Book Club, context of white supremacy, worthless Negro from Virginia, Gus T. Renegade, and for another broadcast, hopefully to share constructive information on the global system of white supremacy. Today's date, Friday, March 6, 2026. So I have been told. This is our third installment on Dr. Colin Anthony Beckles' Pan-African Sites of Resistance, Black Bookstores, and the Struggle to Represent Black Identity. We're picking up his dissertation in the third chapter, specifically on the subsection, The Education and Media Systems. That's where we're picking up at. As we left off last week, he was kind of laying out the national system of white supremacy in the UK and the anti-blackness that infects all areas of people activity, even down to the literature and content that is aimed at white British children. The audio segment that we heard at the beginning. Oh, and I did want to make sure I point out, so this is 4 books in a row we have read that relate or deal with COINTELPRO in some way, shape, form. I don't know how many book clubs there are in the world that can say they have gone on a streak, and not even in a deliberate manner, because we've written different types of books. This isn't even a book, and books published over different time periods. We've got a good 30, 40 years of literature that we have read, white authors, non-white authors, and COINTELPRO has come up in all 4. Any hoodles. The author that we heard at the beginning audio segment, Selena Brown, non-white female, black female, in the UK, victim of white supremacy. She was talking about her efforts as a victim of racism trying to write children's books. She talked about her first effort, self-published, Nina and the Green Juice, and she said that publishers, I will assume classified as white, told her, in fact, I will assume white women told her, oh, no, nobody is going to buy this. You got some Nina, chick on the cover with an afro, all that kinky Negro hair. Oh, God, nah, nobody's going to buy that. Sound like she could have been over here in the U.S., UK, same thing. She said that this, not only it did not defeat or discourage her from publishing, she went ahead and got Nina and the Green Juice published, but then she went and started her own effort to help other black authors get published, wrote more books herself, and started the Black British Book Festival. And they said the same thing, that, oh my gosh, how you gonna have a festival? How you think this gonna amount to anything? And the first word you got on it is black. Guess that ain't no asset on either side of the pond. But they've had the Black British Book Festival, I think, now for almost 5 years, going strong. And she talked about their efforts. I mean, I guess it would have to be since she writes children's books. But I mean, hey, everybody should be in support of getting more black children to read. She talked about the effort to make sure that they get black British children at the Black British Book Festival. She said they leave with 5 books. Being truthful, I cannot think my black childhood, I cannot think of a time or an event where I left and I had 5 books. Much less, and I'm thinking that they probably got some books with some black characters, maybe got Nina the Green Juice. Like, man, My Rice is Best. Forgot she has other children's books where you would actually have black people on the cover of the books. Wow. Superb effort. I know Dr. Frances Cress Welsing would be super pleased with that effort. And then she said to take all the information that she's gotten from publishing and the difficult racism she's experienced in the publishing industry, and then to share that with other black people so that they can maybe have an easier go of it, getting their material published and out to a black reading public that is very hungry and very in need of great literature, especially for black children. With that, we will get to it. Again, that was Selena Brown. You can look her up online, all the platforms to get her content, but we will get to it. Dr. Colin Anthony Beckles, Pan-African Sites of Resistance. Again, picking up in Chapter 3, White Supremacy, Racism in the UK. Bot said, pay attention to the similarities between the repression black bookstore owners in the UK experience relative to what we've already learned about in the U.S., courtesy Char Adams. Katherine Massey Book Club, audio segment 1.
The education and media systems. In England, the doctrines of racism produced by imperial, religious, and scientific sources were disseminated to the English masses via the education system and media. In schools, cheap newspapers, juvenile literature, racism told the British working class that black people were savages whom British rule was rescuing from heathenism and internecine strife. Indeed, the attempt to indoctrinate the English populace were so pervasive that in 1902, J.A. Hobson complained about the persistent attempt to seize the school system for imperialism masquerading as patriotism. Fryer notes that the 19th century British historians were the most vigorous proponents of racism. Additionally, he cites Hobson's work, which revealed that racism was in fact widely and persistently disseminated through school books and other texts prepared for the education or amusement of children. In terms of local publications, common everyday books, newspapers, and magazines supplemented the formal education system's production and dissemination of negative meaning of black African identity. Fryer reports on the extent to which racist representations of Africa permeated British children's literature, as well as noting the wide circulation and inexpensive price. By 1880, more juvenile books were being published in Britain than any other type of literature, and over 24 magazines, mostly directed to adolescent males, were appearing weekly on the newsstands. These usually sold for a penny, and the boys' own paper claimed a circulation for over 1 million. In the widely circulated adventure stories of Frederick Marryat, Thomas Mayne Reid, William H.G. Kingston, Robert M. Ballantyne, George A. Henty, and William Stables, Africans are invariably described as ugly, animal-like, unintelligent, incompetent, in abstract thought, physically dirty, cowardly, boastful, lazy, childish, and given to lying and thieving. African customs and behavior are viewed as barbarous. African social and political organization is described as primitive. With Henty in particular, the political implications are made plain and simple. Easy domination of a native is a theme running through all the stories. Submission is complete and service is total. The servant is held in thrall by the Englishman's superiority. Fryer, 1989. Additionally, it must be noted that the racist discourse was not only limited to the written word. Indeed, Fryer suggested that even in the lyrics of juvenile and working-class songs, racism was pervasive. As such, he states that in The Music Hall, racism told the British working class that black people were savages whom British rule was rescuing from heathenism and internecine strife. We have briefly dealt with the dominant side of the racial structure. We now move on to demonstrate how British blacks used what little political power they had to resist these racist constructions of their identity. Section 2. This section attempts to review the forms of black resistance occurring in England around the turn of the 20th century. Below, we investigate the role of Britain's black intellectuals, black seamen, and black students. Moreover, we investigate their links to the development of black political organizations and black presses. Black intelligentsia and the development of Pan-Africanism. The increase in the discursive attacks on black identity made by the English and European intelligentsia were coupled with the growth of European imperialism. This became part of the conditions contributing to the development of a common consciousness among the black British population, a general appreciation and understanding on the part of black people of their position as among the oppressed and exploited. This common consciousness spread among blacks in England, as did the concern for the exploitation of the African continent. Its presence became manifest in organizational form in England during the later part of the 19th century. This common consciousness found its truest expression in 1897 when Henry Sylvester Williams, a West Indian student studying and living in London, coined the term Pan-African. Because of the structure of the education system in the British colonies, advanced degrees were sought in the motherland. The talented tenth of the British colonies usually migrated to England in order to study at its colleges and universities. While studying in London, Williams established the Pan-African Association and founded the first ever Pan-African Conference in London in 1900. In a letter to a friend, we can listen to the conference participant Benito Sylvain as he critiques those who created and propagated the discourse on black inferiority, and then explains the purposes of the Pan-African Association and Conference. The detractors of the race are of two sorts. One, those who, incapable of seeking out the whys and wherefores of phenomena which astound their narrow minds, receive and transmit, without even suspecting the gravity of what they are doing, unfortunate ideas which the apologists for slavery had such a great interest in propagating, and which they were able to make the ignorant masses accept without too much trouble. 2. Those who, being in position to deflate the a priori judgments commonly foisted upon people of color, are nevertheless restrained from doing so by a stubborn racial chauvinism. These latter, instead of trying to stop it, deliberately go along with a prejudice which is compounded by the fact that it originates in errors which are being passed off as science. Now, I am as convinced as you are that the execrable theory of inferior and superior races is a moral monstrosity which is based, whatever one might say, solely on the idea of exploitation of man by man. It has served in centuries past as a justification for the most revolting of social inequities. It still exercises in our time an even more evil influence. No, the black man was not created to be a footstool for white power. To all those who dare to support this position, we reply fearlessly, whatever their high standing in scientific circles, you insult the objectivity of science. At the conference, all the arguments, old and new, which our detractors invoke for the support of their odious ethnological hierarchization, the perfect inanity of which you have so definitively demonstrated, will be subjected to the close scrutiny of scientific discussion for the complete edification of the whole world. Sylvain and Martin, 1983. The Pan-African Association was comprised of scholars and students, politicians, lawyers and judges, businessmen and clergy who came together to challenge the racist meanings of black identity. In terms of the 1900 Pan-African Conference itself, delegates came from the Caribbean, America, Canada, Europe, and Africa. One of the primary objectives was as follows: that a general association comprising the intellectual elite of civilized blacks would be established under the name Pan-African Association to centralize or control activities of all organizations, whether in independent countries or colonies, which have as their objective the protection and education of peoples of African origin. How to unite the African world into one solid body which would be strong, which would fight on the behalf of Africa, and which would rescue Africa from that European scramble. T. Martin, 1983. Other Pan-African conferences and organizations were to follow. In England, in 1937, a group of black writers and activists, C.L.R. James, Wallace Johnson, George Padmar, Jomo Kenyatta, and Ross McConnell, formed an International African Service Bureau. In 1944, the Bureau merged into the Pan-African Federation to become the British section of the Pan-African Congress movement, demanding democratic rights, civil liberties, and self-determination for all subject people. Finally, in 1945, the Fifth Pan-African Congress met in Manchester, England, pledging itself to the liquidation of colonialism and imperialism. 1919 riots and local black worker and student organizations. Black resistance forms were not restricted to those created by the talented tenth of the Black British. Indeed, black seamen who migrated to England to fulfill its labor demands of the Industrial Revolution were involved with students and black groups as well. One such organization was the Port of Spain Colored Association, formed in 1907. After the end of World War I, England's high demand for labor ceased. Thus, when white English seamen returned from the war, they found no jobs in the motherland. The scapegoat for the increase in job competition was pinned on the employed blacks living in the port towns. White racism, to some extent suppressed during the war, resurfaced with a vengeance. Mentally buttressed by the racist proclamations and writings of the British intelligentsia, white working-class racists rioted, directing their anger against black seamen living in the port towns. In 1919, whites waged race riots against blacks in Cardiff, Liverpool, London, Hull, and other port areas where West African and Lascar seamen had settled. Moreover, like a mother protecting her young, the British intelligentsia came to defend their well-educated white working-class racists. For example, the London Times published the letter of a retired British colonial administrator blaming the riots on black men who were having affairs with white women. Moreover, he wrote that the average Englishman was revolted at the idea of blacks having sexual contact with white women, and thereby suggested the deportation of blacks. Despite the physical and discursive attacks by whites, the blacks would not succumb. In Cardiff and other port towns, the black workers stood steadfast, fighting off hand to hand the physical attacks of working-class and unemployed white racists who attempted to firebomb the homes of black seamen. Additionally, organizations such as the London-based Society for People of African Origins saw fit to reply to the British intelligentsia's call for deportation of blacks by stating that when whites left Africa and the West Indies, the blacks in England would gladly return the favor. After these riots, we see a surge in terms of black British organizations. The plight of black seamen's living conditions in the docklands was another significant factor. Thus, the West African Students' Union was established in 1925, and the predominantly West Indian League of Colored Peoples was formed in 1931 as well. The goals of both organizations were opposing race prejudice at home as well as ending European colonialism. As Sivandan notes, the connections between colonialism and racialism between black students and black workers were becoming clearer. Birth of black presses. Those organizations, with their fledgling Pan-African consciousness and anti-colonialism, gave birth to England's black presses in the early 20th century. Indeed, sources suggest that we see a surge of black publications proliferating around this early 20th century Pan-Africanist movement. Black newspapers, leaflets, pamphlets were particularly prevalent in the period up to World War II. For example, the West Indian League of Colored Peoples published its journal, Keys, in 1935. Investigated and exposed cases of racial discrimination. The most prominent papers of this period, the Keys, made its politics clear. Its objectives were to promote the interests, rights, and freedom of black people throughout the world. As such, it served as a challenge to the racism propagated by the British intelligentsia, providing an alternative view to the one invariably peddled in the British, i.e. mainstream, in favor of British colonial policy. Martin lists a set of minimum conditions necessary for the success of a black press. 1. The extent and use of the repressive state apparatus, police, laws, etc., in a particular context, country, or territory. 2. The level of unofficial, public, white opposition. 3. The size of the black population. 4. The size and relative purchasing potential of the black population. 5. The level of political ideological consciousness or awareness of common position and potential for mobilization. 6. The potential for gaining sympathetic forces or allies for change. 7. The capacity to mobilize the necessary material resources, finance, equipment, technology, etc. 8. The level of literacy of the black population. Given the above, it is evident that these structural factors served to militate against a large-scale development of circulation of the black political publication. Blacks lacked financial status, access to formal education, and the specific resources required for entry into publishing. Moreover, state forces worked to diminish the black population, as sources suggest that many blacks, and one can assume black activists, were forcibly repatriated to the West Indies during the time period. Given the above, we can now see how attempts at white domination led to the establishment of a variety of Pan-African resistance forms came during the late 19th and early 20th century. In the next section, I demonstrate how similar dynamics provided the framework for race relations in England after World War II. Section 3. In this section, we see a resurgence in attempts at white domination in England. Below, we investigate the role played by black migration, labor surplus, the British intelligentsia, white political organizations, and anti-immigration legislation. The forces of migration. In post-World War II England, a flourishing English economy was present once again. By this time, Britain had stockpiled through exploitation whole reserves of cheap black labor in its colonies. It was inevitable that the countries in which they were stockpiled would supply Britain with the labor it needed for its factories and services. Thus, once again, in order to fill her labor needs, her racist pronouncements were muted. England extended her welcoming arms to members of her empire, calling on them to do their duty as British citizens to help rebuild England. Following the pull of English jobs and the lure of the mythical life that all so-called British citizens would enjoy in Mother England, colonized Africans and Afro-Caribbean peoples once again left their birthplaces for the shores of England. But this time, it was not just the seamen. The destruction caused by the Nazi bombings in England required all forms of labor. Thus, it was the largest mass migration to England by non-whites the country had ever seen. However, upon arriving in jolly old England, the illusion of welcome citizenship was quickly dispelled. The British intelligentsia representing the tradition of racism. One reason the myth of welcome citizenship was just that, a myth, seems to be that the negative definitions of African black identity continued to be pumped into the minds of English youth via the British education system. Though it was the 19th century, British historians who glorified the Teutonic race and displayed contempt for inferior races, Fryer points out that the racist tradition that characterized the British education system was carried on in the 20th century academy. Thus, even after the Second World War, the information presented to British students in their textbooks often quoted the classic 19th century historians who maintained their grip upon school history teachings. Killingsley's 1977 study of African history in the classroom shows how 19th century racism predominated the classroom well into the late 1970s. For the majority of schools, Africa's past is still either ignored, denigrated, or distorted. In many syllabuses, Africa is a vast tabula rasa awaiting the appearance of the white man. Africa is reduced to an anthropological zoo. It is not uncommon for teachers to illustrate lessons about early man by showing film of present-day hunting and gathering societies, a strategy which can lead children to conclude that Africa is still in the Stone Age and that there is a hierarchy of mankind. This racist discord was not restricted to history alone. Indeed, in geography and English literature school books, English school children were taught the concept of race and social evolution. Dada, former black bookshop manager, was a student studying in London during the 1960s. He recounts how black history and culture was presented. Because the education system in Britain did not recognize a number of things about black people, one, that we did not have a culture. If we did have a culture, it was a culture of savages. It did not recognize that we made huge contributions to the development of the world, and in particular huge contributions to the development of Britain in terms of economic infrastructure, and so on and so forth, and it refused to recognize that. It spoke about slavery, but it tended to whitewash history so that Europeans came out better than they actually were. It tended to indicate quite strongly that we were saved from slavery, we were emancipated by generous Europeans, not that we fought and gained our freedom. Dada, 3/1694. Dada continues specifically talking about the images he remembers being taught in terms of African and the Caribbean. Africa is peopled by savages, unintelligent. Images of the Caribbean is one of dependency complexes. People are not really doing anything to help themselves, but they're waiting on handouts from Britain. We are the smiling, affable character, very menial, gentle, malleable. All a tourist has to come and do is say, do this, and we jump, we sing. Dada, 3/1694. Finally, it must be pointed out that teachers could not get this information in the form of textbooks if it were not for the English publishing industry. We can assume that the publishers were hard at work, flooding the British educational system with antiquated racist texts. Indeed, many of the classics of children's literature, ancient and modern, are periodically reprinted with their objectionable features retained, and are still widely read. Too few jobs, too many blacks, organizing and legislating race. By 1955, a mild recession was occurring in England, and the demand for labor dropped significantly. Moreover, England's empire was crumbling. The loss of India and the impending loss of the Caribbean and Africa had spelt the end of empire and the decline of Britain as a great power. All that was left of the colonial enterprise was the ideology of racial superiority. As such, as quickly as England had once extended her immense economic arms to welcome her black colonial subjects, she now extended her racist fist to get rid of them. As described in the above section, via the education system, the British continued to be well educated in the belief that white racial superiority. As they were no longer a world power, the ideology of racial supremacy was something to fall back on. Given the now superfluous masses of black labor in the country, various white political organizations and societies for white racist organizations sprang up across England to alleviate the growing employment problem during the mid to late 1950s. Mosley's pre-war British Union of Fascists was now revived as the Union movement and was matched for race hatred by a rash of other organizations. A.K. Chesterton's League of Empire Loyalists, Colin Jordan's White Defence League, John Bean's National Labour Party, Andrew Fontaine's British National Party, and in the twilight area between these and the right wing of the Tory party, various societies for racial preservation were beginning to sprout. Svenland, 1986. In addition, racist attacks motivated by the theme of Keep Britain White were sponsored by English statesmen. Indeed, in 1958, Cabinet Minister Mosley's infamous Teddy Boys went on so-called nigger hunting sprees, physically brutalizing Britain's black population. Under the watchful eye of the police, racist attacks became a daily part of black immigrants' life in England, culminating in 1958 Notting Hill riots. Echoing Queen Elizabeth's racist cries of the 16th century, England's statesmen again led the racist anti-immigration chants of their white countrymen, and a series of racist legislation and political consolidations were generated throughout the 1960s. Indeed, the call by English statesmen for an end to the country being overrun by illegal aliens was integral to the eventual passage of the Immigration Control Act of 1962. In 1965, the White Paper renewed the Immigration Act and extended the restrictions of colored immigration on the basis that fewer numbers made for better race relations. And in 1967, white preservationist groups such as the League of Empire Loyalists, the British National Party, and the Racial Preservation Society merged to form the National Front political party and put forth candidates for the Greater London Council general elections. This series of state-sanctioned racist legislation culminated in 1968 when English Cabinet Minister Enoch Powell gave his Rivers of Blood speech, a speech which in plain English gave clear voice to white England's truly racist nightmare. The blacks were swarming all over him, no, all over the country. Whole areas and towns across England were covered with them. We must take action now. Stop the inflow, promote the outflow, stop the material of the future growth of the immigrant-descended population. Powell wanted to stop the breeding ground of the black British. Sivananden, 1986. Gilroy, 1986, suggests that in the speech, Powell's simple question, "What kind of people are we?" was an attempt to strike a chord in the hearts of all white Englishmen, and his analysis is worth full notation. Enoch Powell's superficially simple question, "What kind of people are we?" summoned those very images of axioms and answered itself powerfully in the negative. We were not the muggers. We were not the illegal immigrants. We were not criminals, Rastafarians, purveyors of arranged marriages. We were the lonely old lady taunted by wide-grinned pickaninnies. We were the only white child in a class full of blacks. We were the white man, frightened that in 15 to 20 years the black man would have the whip hand over us. The black presence is thus constructed as a problem or a threat against which a homogeneous white national we could be unified. Gilroy, 48, 1986. Additionally, while striking a chord of affiliation with the whites, the other consequence was the alienation of blacks. Adjani, a bookshop owner who had migrated to England to work in the factories during the 1960s, remembers Powell's speech. His memories succinctly depicts the crux of the identity dilemma many black colonial immigrants experienced. Now that Powell had clearly spelled out the blacks were not part of the English we. What am I if England is not the mother country? Fortunately, with the rise of black power movements across the globe, answers were soon forthcoming. Chapter 3, Conclusions. The first section of this chapter was a review of the dominant side of race relations before the 20th century. Our review has led us to the 3 overall conclusions. First, based on the first section of this chapter, we can conclude that because of migration patterns and the need to justify slavery, racist discourse was churned out by Britain's major institutions, the Crown, the Church, the Academy, and the press. As a result, the average Englishman was exposed to notions of race dominated by white supremacy, wherein black African identity was socially constructed as inferior to white European identity. Moreover, there was a unity underlying the various racist discourses. What they all had in common was a political function. All of them, in one way or another, justified British rule over black people. Indeed, the question put forth by the Crown statesman at the turn of the century is a fitting capitulation of the themes running through the British discourse. What is empire? Asked Lord Rosebery in 1900, but the predominance of race. The discussion presented in the second section leads us to our second overall conclusion. Despite the predominance of the white racist institutions, Black British were not passive recipients of the notion of Black inferiority. On the contrary, Black British were active in their own defense against British white supremacy. The attempts at white domination led to the establishment of a variety of Pan-African resistance formations during the late 19th and early 20th century. Indeed, the Black intelligentsia was integral in representing the meaning of Black identity by conceptualizing the unifying concept of Pan-Africanism. Such representations of Black identity were further constructed, refined, and disseminated to other Black communities via the organizations such as the Pan-African Conferences. Moreover, the 1919 race riots and the deplorable living conditions of Black seamen led to Black physical resistance as well as a surge in Black worker and student organizations. Finally, we saw how the establishment of these Black organizations led to the development of Black presses. Presses which, despite their small number, still managed to disseminate Pan-African representations of Black identity which challenged and resisted white racist definitions of Black identity. Finally, from the third section, we can draw the following general conclusion. The decline of the British Empire, an influx of Black migrants, and an oversupply of labor recatalyzed various attempts at white domination in post-war Britain. The continuation of racist teachings in the education system, escalation of organized mob violence, the rebirth of racial preservation societies, and white supremacist political parties, and the creation of anti-immigration legislation. As we saw, the pull of English jobs and the mythical lure of the good life and citizenship prompted many Blacks to migrate to the shores of post-World War II England. However, in order to make sure the new Black immigrants understood their place as subordinates, and to reassure the whites of their position as racial superiors, the British intelligentsia was hard at work disseminating racist notions of Black identity via the education and media systems. When the future brought a decline in employment opportunities, a situation of job competition catalyzed the suppressed racial hostility. Racist white organizations went on a campaign of racial terror to intimidate Blacks to repatriate to the colonies. In addition to these cleansing efforts, British statesmen attempted to cease any further Black migration to England by lobbying for and putting into law anti-immigration legislation. Therefore, via these multiple methods, the English intended to keep jolly old England white, one way or another. Despite these attempts at domination, as we see in the following chapter, British Blacks once again rose to fight against these attacks. This time, however, the necessary resources were more in their favor. Chapter 4: Black Power and the Birth of England's Black Bookshop Movement. And as racism intensified, the resistance to it intensified too, but in a different way from the 1950s and 1960s. Whereas the struggles of that period had been taken up with the first generation, fight against brutal racism, those of the late 1960s and early 1970s had to address themselves to creating a social and educational infrastructure for the second generation. In self-help groups and social centers, supplementary schools, workshops and bookshops, hostels for the unemployed and the homeless, youth clubs and associations. Sivanandan, 1990. In the first section of this chapter, we witnessed the post-World War II era racial attacks in discursive, physical, and legislative forms, which led to the formation of many anti-racist organizations. Moreover, we review the resurgence of black presses and the establishment of black bookshops during the 1960s and 1970s. Section 1. Black Power Organizations. In response to the racist activities occurring in England during this time period, many black organizations were formed. For example, in 1961, the Coordinating Committee Against Racist Discrimination, CCARD, in Birmingham was formed. In 1962, the Conference of Afro-Asian Caribbean Organizations, CAACO, was founded in London. Additionally, after Malcolm X's visit to England in 1965 and Stokely Carmichael's visit in 1967, the U.S.-based Black Power movement began to take hold in England. The result was the birth of a number of new black political organizations in England. For example, black nationalist Michael X headed the Racial Action Adjustment Society, RAAS, an organization that urged black men to unite and generated many black British militants. The UCPA organized meetings and study groups to raise black consciousness. Finally, in 1968, in response to Powell's rebel rousing and the consolidation of white racist organizations, over 50 black organizations came together to form a national body, the Black People's Alliance, BPA, a militant front for black consciousness against racism. At the local level, these community-based, grassroots organizations came together to form self-reliant, anti-racist networks of black power. We had such a rich infrastructure of organizations, parties, and self-help projects. Self-help was what we did, exactly because we were outside mainstream society. We built a whole series of projects which grew out of organizations in the community. Sivanandan, 1990. The resurgence of black presses. Once the organizations were formed, one of their initial concerns was spreading the word, and this was done via the establishment of radical black presses. What facilitated the surge in the number of presses being established at this time period was that a number of factors identified as absent during the post-World War I era were now present. For example, the following were present. A dramatic increase in the black population. B, a hostile reception by white English people who were competing with blacks for jobs. C, close proximity among blacks on the workplace floor and in the segregated, inadequate housing. D, anti-colonial and black nationalist movements were on the rise. E, blacks had access to the education system. And F, blacks had access to the specific resources needed to enter into publishing. The presence of these factors allowed the publication of black radical publications to flourish. Given the fact that the presses were usually tied to these black organizations, the black newspapers published during this time militantly confronted the oppressive forces waged against the black community. As such, they focused specifically on the police, the education system, and the employers. For example, the Black Panther movement started Freedom News, and the Black Liberation Front started Grassroots. Other black organizations generated their own periodicals. Black Voice was started by the Black Unity and Freedom Party and had a Black Women's Action Committee. Frontline was started by the Brixton and Croydon Collective. Uhuru was started by the Black People's Freedom Movement. The Black Workers Action Committee, Weekly, and the Black Liberator were started by the Black Workers Action Committee. One of the primary distribution centers, archives, and houses for these newspaper presses were the black bookshops. However, these shops took on a life of their own. Via oral history interview, we turn now to listen to bookshop owners elaborate upon the development and struggles of black bookshops. Black bookshops and the black education movement. The black power struggle was fought on many fronts by many organizations against racism in the workplace, racist immigration policies, and racist housing conditions. As the 1960s spilled into 1970s, racist education practices was another major front. The seeds of education battle began to bloom in the mid-1960s. In 1963, white parents in Southall demanded separate classes for their children. Black children reportedly had language problems, low educability, and behavior problems, and were therefore holding back the progress of their white children. Similarly, the British education system was labeling Afro-Caribbean children as ESN, educationally subnormal. The effect that these racist practices had on black parents and children was devastating, and a very high percentage of our children were being put into ESN, educationally subnormal schools, because the state felt they had learning difficulty. Children who back in the Caribbean would be getting A grades, when they come over here, for some strange reason, they get nowhere. Sometimes their learning would take huge leaps backwards. It was primarily because of the cultural and political approach of the education system. Dada, 3/16/94. In defense of their children, the Afro-Caribbean community in general focused its energies on the miseducation of its children and began a statewide education movement against the British education system and its practice of labeling their children as ESN. As major figures in the overall anti-racist movement, Afro-Caribbean parents John LaRose and Jessica Huntley organized and formed the Caribbean Education and Community Workers Association, C.O.W.S. Huntley and LaRose's roles in the development of black radical presses and bookshops as a crucial part of the anti-racist education movement in particular, and the black struggle in general, is of critical importance. We turn to hear discuss their motives and objectives for initiating the black bookshop movement.
I'm ashamed to be a black guy. 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 I'm ashamed to be
in this country, in 15 or 20 years' time, the black man will have the whip hand over the white man.
I've just been rereading Enoch Powell, The Rivers of Blood speech. His prophecy was absolutely right in one sense. The Tiber didn't foam with blood, but flames lambent wrapped round Tottenham and wrapped round Clapham. But it wasn't intercommunal violence. This is where he was completely wrong. What's happened is that a substantial section of the chavs that you wrote about have become black. The whites have become black, a particular sort of violent, destructive, nihilistic gangster culture.
This is what happens when a fear of the police evaporates.
However, the IPCC have made clear their findings thus far now. I think last night, there is no question that this was an execution style coup.
They are feral rats, feral rats.
The mobs were feral
rats.
I saw an image of a boy, a black boy making a white boy strip in the street. To me, those things are reprehensible. And those people should have more than the book thrown at them.
His prophecy was absolutely right.
I'm ashamed to be a black guy, seeing a lot of young other black people causing this trouble and bringing our names down.
Katherine Massey Book Club, you wankers. What have we been doing for 14 years? There you go. Now, we heard about Enoch Powell and the rivers of blood. Astute, or I guess I can't even say astute. At this point, you would have to. I have been listening to the context of white supremacy for quite some time, and or I have really been digging through the archives. 14 years ago, and dig this. 14 years ago, Planet of the Apes was rebooted. Obeezy was in the White House. It was rebooted the weekend of Obama's birthday. Anyway, so they reboot Planet of the Apes. This is 2011, unless my memory is bad. They reboot Planet of the Apes, August 2011. The London riots begins the same weekend after Mark Duggan, non-white male with a white parent, white mom, exactly what they were talking about. He should have been deported. But Mark Duggan shot and killed by the police. They say he had a firearm of some sort and all the rest. They rioted in London. When I say they, it was mostly white people. They should still have lots of video of this so you can see the people that were out there rioting. Oh my gosh, that little sound clip right there. We had so many, for whatever reason, very early on, this 2011. So the cows had been on the air, back on the air for 2 years, from 2009. But for whatever reason, I paid a lot of attention to those riots in London. We had lots of programs. We had non-white guests on, white people on, talk about what they saw, that whole experience. Even back then, which sounds like ancient times, 2011, you could watch, BBC Live on TV, on your computer, or whatever the case may be. So I watched a ton of the live coverage. That clip where it has a black male saying, "I'm ashamed to be a black guy." They have black people on TV doing this, making us look bad. Oh, they played that over. When I say they, the BBC, they played that over and over and over. It was mostly white people out cutting a fool, looting, all the rest of it. You can even look at the arrest pictures afterwards. It was way overwhelmingly white people, but they played that segment repeatedly. And you heard Dr. William Les Henry. He was a guest on the program repeatedly. We had him as a guest on the program specifically during the riots. That was Dr. Les, black male, speaking on UK television, and he said that he saw images of a black male making a white male take his pants off. And this was widely circulated in the news. I shared this image from, I guess, 15 years ago, not 14, 15 years ago. I shared this image. It was in The Guardian, other UK outlets. Even to me, it looked peculiar. Now, it certainly could have happened. I haven't visited England, but it was broad daylight, and it was one black male and one white male, and it looked like he was making the white dude take his trousers off. Now, are we the same size? Can I wear your britches? And then who's taking the picture of this? Like, why aren't you calling, the Met, get help, pepper spray, something? Anyway, I just thought it was bizarre, but that was another one. It was widely circulated. Again, it was mostly white people rioting. I remember Boris Johnson, he was mayor. He hadn't even become prime minister at this point. He went out and gave a talk about law and order. It was one black person in the crowd, and he turned and looked at him and said, people need to behave, act like they got some sense. And the black guy looked at him and said, why are you looking at me? Like, what? I've been out doing... Man, and during all of this, they invoked Enoch Powell, read the speech, the rivers of blood and all this, the Negro's going to have the whip handle, and they read all that BBC and went back, and he was right, and even they admitted it was mostly white people, but these are white people who soaked up all that Negro culture, and they think they're Rastafarians and all the rest of it, acting like picking niggas out here running in the street. 2011 London riots. You can learn so much about the system of white supremacy. And again, all of this was around the police shooting of a non-white male with one white parent, Mark Duggan. I think they got tons of documentaries and such on all this at this point. And it was even more. I forgot the context. The context one, Planet of the Apes did come out this weekend. It was tons of memes about that. The apes have taken over London. Okay. The other context was the 2012 Olympics was in London. So it was, oh my God, if y'all don't let this sort of nonsense happen right now, what kind of security are we going to have for the Olympics? Kobe Bryant and them over here to play and y'all running amok in the streets? London riots. You can learn so much about the system of white supremacy. Shout to Mark Duggan. The number 720-716-7300. The code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. The email untiljustice@gmail.com. untiljustice@gmail.com. I reckon I should say even the music is important. We had the same music at the beginning as we did right there. That is, it's double whammy, I guess, for the UK. That is music for the funeral of Queen Mary II. I think that's like I know that's mid 20th century, not the more recent Queen Mary. And then they used that in the film Clockwork Orange, ultra violence. And some people got offended about that, but that's like the main theme for Stanley Kubrick's film Clockwork Orange, which is basically a British film, British cast, and it's set in London. So that's even the music, ultra violence. I was hoping people would have that in, and the British Empire, Queen, all of it. Very apropos for the London riots and the section of the book that we heard about today. Even I can say, tip of the cap for Gus T. I correctly foreshadowed last week in talking about the Windrush generation, even though he didn't use that term. That's what he's talking about. He says all the black people, London is messed up because Hitler then came and bombed and knocked us senseless, and we need niggers and cheap labor to come over here and help us clean and rebuild and get everything shiny and spiffy again so we can have the Olympics in 2012. And they got them all over, but they don't give them pay. Oh, I guess you would need to extend the story into the 21st century to the, oh man, you niggers that we didn't want over here anyway, you ain't even got paperwork. Hey, he said deport them. Get on out of here, loafing, and you've been interloping and hanging out over here and raping white women for all these years. We should have kicked you out a long time ago. Get the stepping. That's what they've been talking about. That's the kind of final end note to that whole greatest generation. And they helped us clean up, and we needed this cheap labor and come to the motherland and blah 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 blah. Now, if you've been here and set up shop, when you're in your what they call it golden years, you get the boot. Yeah. Windrush generation. They got whole documentaries on that too. But I foreshadowed. I said that last week, and boop, then he went into detail about it this week. Global system of white supremacy. Let's see. This is one I will say, man, it would be cool because I did not know this book was going to be so global until like last week in its scope, focus with regards to white supremacy, racism. It would be really cool. Our UK listeners, as opposed to grousing about non-white people and criticizing them, participation on this here book, even if it was writing in, man, Is this your experience? They still have all of this like flagrantly racist content in the school books? I guess some of that would be added now with the Brexit. Keep us British and complaining about, too many immigrants and all this. I guess it'd be updated to a degree, but even some of the non-white people that we've had over the many years we've been broadcasting from that area of the world specifically, they have talked about a lot of this. The teddy boys, white thugs chase them home after school or to school or at school. All of this talked about in the archives because we had some. And Stephen Lawrence, man. His mother, guest on the program, Baroness Doreen Lawrence, two-time guest on the program. That right there, what does it mean to be white in Britain? Get out of here. Let's see, email number 1. Greetings, Gus, callers, listeners. Relevant articles I have come across. 1. Britain's Black Book Shops, Diasporic Identity and the Creation of the Transnational Black Intellectual. Alicia Odoy, you think? Odoy, I'll say. I'm ignorant, forgive me. Smith, Black Historians. 2. The National Association of Black Bookstores launches State of the Black Bookstore Report and Directory, Black Enterprise. That's like 4 days ago. This was published, 2026. 3. National Association of Black Bookstores Report. That's www.nab2.org. A few highlights currently. 306 black bookstores. 90% report annual revenue under $250,000. 14 states have no black bookstores. Washington State is not in that number. Sales of books by black authors have declined 14%, while overall print sales saw a slight increase. What would I make of that in terms of sales by black authors declining? That really, it could be a myriad. Okay, so you've had all the economic turmoil. I think that was talked about in Char Adams Black-Owned, where she said I think she was talking about 2008. But either way, you have economic turmoil. That might be one of the things that people say, hey, I'm not going to splurge and buy no, $50 hardbacks and all that coffee table books. I don't even know if I'm going to have a coffee table. Forget all that. So that could be one. I think they said that they had a downturn. You had a brief spike where maybe a few acceptable authors, Isabel Wilkerson's Cased, and maybe a few other books that are repugnant. Now the third worst book I've ever read, but a few other books that are not very helpful to understanding racism, white supremacy, what it is, how it works. But that was very brief. And then after like 2020, 2021, boop, all that's over. We're back to reading Adolf Hitler, Mein Kampf, and, the rest of it, Harry Potter, whatever else. 50 Shades of Grey. But that could be part of it. Also, it's 2020, COVID, and you had all those people not in school and Zoom. They were talking about impact, reading comprehension, reading scores really, really low and all that. They've been talking about reading scores have been dropping for a while. Could be showing up there as well, where you have a generation of black people who I just don't do as much reading. By 2026, that would be people, okay, maybe they were in high school when all that stuff started, so they graduated, moved out there, maybe in their early 20s now. I don't really do too much reading. High school got disrupted, and my reading comprehension in there, I didn't have an enjoyable academic experience. I just don't do no reading. But I could see that showing up in a lot of, and reading is not black culture, so I could see that showing up in a lot of ways. Let's see. This might be a constructive book club for a senior level high school student or a college student just to see what goes into this level of scholarly research. I had a different COWS listener say the same thing. Not so much about the demographic, but just kind of for victims in general. That's kind of our brain functioning level, high schools, adolescents, not men and women, Gus T included. But just to see, yes, because we need more. That's why I said it's such a tragedy that Dr. Beckles is no longer with us. The black mental health none of us qualify, but man, because he could have had another, 25 years of research and updated this, and tragedies abound. Anyway, yes, constructive for a lot of reasons, and yes, scholarly study where he's talking pretty direct about white supremacy, at least in my view. Black Intelligentsia and Development of Pan-Africanism. Page 100, the common consciousness found its truest expression in 1987 when Henry Sylvester Williams, a West Indian student studying and living in London, coined the term Pan-African. Born in 1867, died in 1911. In Trinidad, he was both a lawyer and activist against racism. He founded the African Association, later named Pan-African Association. It held its first conference in 1900. Delegates from Africa, West, South, Liberia, West Indies, U.S., named 16th on the list of Great Black Britons in 2003. I think he was in a tragic arrangement. I heard that with a few of the folks mentioned. C.L.R. James, a few of the folks. It'd be Cow-L. 2. The talented 10th of the British colonies usually migrated to England in order to study at its colleges and universities. The term refers to a supposed leadership class of African Americans. The term reportedly was created by white northern philanthropists. It is mostly associated with W.E.B. Du Bois, who used the term as a title of a 1903 essay. I think he later even rejected that as something that would be beneficial to black people. He didn't see any evidence that so-called select group of black people that white people allow to get education, that they would take that information and use it to help other black people and or end racism. He didn't see any evidence that that was true, unless I've been misinformed. 3. After the end of World War I, the scapegoat for the increase in job competition was pinned on the employed blacks. England temporarily submerged its racism and extended its welcoming arms to its colonials in order to exploit the labor. 1919, whites waged race riots, blaming the riots on black men who were the cowbells abound. Same blueprint for 1946, 1996, 2026, 3036. Exploit the victims, blame the victims, terrorize the victims, and always the primary motivation of racist white supremacists is fear of white genetic annihilation. Another interesting metaphor, submerged racism. Not even accurate, because it says it welcomed, allegedly, its colonials in order to exploit their labor. That's not submerging racism. I can't even really say that's refined. Come here, you niggers, we need y'all to clean up. That's about as plantational as it gets. That's the help. And now, if it said, we got citizen, or, hey, we got a passport for you, we're going to naturalize you as a British citizen, so you'll be a dual citizen. You can go back if you want to. We're not locking you up or nothing like that. Dual citizen, if you, think you like it and it's spiffy and you want to stay and hang out here, we'll pay you the same as we pay your white sisters and white brothers, all of that. If they had said that, I said, oh, okay, maybe, yeah, they put the racism aside. That's not what they said. That's not what they did. Windrush. Let's see. And then the same old niggers is, they do that all over the world. They come right back. White genetic annihilation, which would have to be focused on the source, black males. Leroy. 4. Martin lists a set of minimum conditions necessary for the success of a black press: extent, use of the repressive state apparatus, police, laws, etc., level of unofficial public white opposition, size of the black population, size and relative purchasing potential of the black population. That's why I said, if you don't have any coins, I'm not buying no books. Level of political ideological consciousness, potential for gaining sympathetic forces or allies for change. Sounds like not all white people is racist, hopes. The most important one of these conditions is white opposition, either from the state or unofficially by race soldiers without a badge. These conditions seem applicable in part to any effort by victims to initiate a business. Hey, It seems like Dr. Beckles might agree with you because those were the first two listed, and I thought 1 and 2 were the same. It was state repression and then unofficial public white opposition. Like, man, apparently he agrees, and I do too. That's going to be, I mean, hey, and we heard that from Char Adams. You open your bookstore and they might bullets coming through the store before the customers. That might impact, and that might even trump, I said this for Char Adams too, that white opposition to your black bookstore, that might trump your business acumen, whether you are the dumbest business owner ever or the smartest. Once those bullets starts coming through the door, or who is that? IRS. Maybe you got a good business plan. Maybe you don't. Let's see. 5. The forces of migration in post-World War II England. Racist attacks. Motive. Oh, wait a minute. I have to stop because I did get extra on this one. You can look online. I already shared. So you can go. The address is, let me see if I can pull it up here right quick yonder. Okay. So it is mixedmuseum.org.uk. Okay. Now, once you get there, they have an exhibition for the 1919 race riots in the UK. Now, I posted the exact link to that page where they talk exclusively about the 1919 race riots in London, which were probably just like the 2011 race riots. And so I found the article that was written where this retired British general talks about the reason for the riots. And the article, it's titled "The Colour Riots, Reasons for Repatriation," to the editor of the Times. You can, oh my God, you can go and read. Let me see this quick one. It says, it is an undeniable fact that to almost every white man and woman who has lived a life among colored races, intimate association between black or colored men and white women is a thing of horror. And yet this feeling in no sense springs from hatred between the races. Every one of us, probably many faithful friends among the colored. He said he got nigger friends. This is in 1919. Come on. I can't even. You can go read the rest of it where he gives his other reasons why you should not have nigger males with white women. And why this is loathsome is what he is. You gotta go and smack somebody upside the head. But this is from this is a retired British colonial administrator. That means he probably had a job like in, I don't know, Jamaica, Kenya, maybe. Get to smack around Obama's kinfolks. I don't know. Anyway, back to email. Number 5. The forces of migration in post-World War II England. Racist attacks motivated by the theme of Keep Britain White. Really, that's the same thing that they were saying with UKIP. Like, we got to all these dark people and came up, what's going on? We got to, man, come on. We got to close the border. We got to put the wall up, man. Keep Britain White were sponsored by English statesmen. 1958, Mosley's infamous Teddy Boys went on so-called nigger hunting sprees. 1958, they'll tell you they weren't even really doing so-called lynchings in this part of the world, snicker. But they'll tell you that, if you take a history class or something, because that's like, 5 years after the lynching of Emmett Till? 3 years, not that far. 3 years. We're talking 1958. Talking about 3 years after the lynching of Emmett Till. Say, wow, you all are doing what? That is crazy. Pride, nowhere to run. Physically brutalizing Britain's black population. The 1958 Notting Hill riots, they didn't include that. The one, remember, they put the actress, they did the British film about the white romance. They had Hugh Grant. That's it. I got it. They had the romance, but they didn't have nothing about I remember they didn't have no black people when they went to Notting Hill, but dang. Anyway, let's see. This aspect history of British white behavior has been discussed extensively on multiple. Yep. David Gilbourne, London riots, white people lie. Like, we've had tons of broadcasts about the UK riots. You just have to go back. You'll hear that sound clip that I played over and over again. Enoch Powell. Remember, we almost read a biography on Enoch Powell. 6. We're the lonely. Sorry, get that in. Enoch Powell. We were the lonely old lady taunted by wide grinning pickaninnies. Come on. One. Julia Roberts, that's what I was thinking in Notting Hill. Like, they didn't put that in. No, come on. But one, man, for all of the white British football hooligans, you got the audacity. Matter of fact, I just seen a white British documentary talking about, you want to talk about hooligans. Boy, let the soccer team don't win the game. Oh my, sometimes even let the soccer team win the game. They put the video up. They done tore up the whole neighborhood, broke out windows in people's houses. I didn't even go to the game. I ain't got no rooting interest. They had old white ladies come out the house. Ma'am, did they terrify? She said, I'm 79 years old. What you mean? Terrified, ain't breaking glass and brother. Boy, she was hot. She wasn't talking about no wide grinning picking it. These are white thugs, grown white men. Liquored up, I'm mad. We ain't win the football game. What was the score? Talk about thugs. Get out of there. That's British culture right there. Talk about some thugs. I always thought the term pickaninny had its origins in the U.S., but the origin of the term pickaninnies is unclear. The word itself may be derived from Portuguese and is connected to the slave trade, of course. It was used by slaves in the West Indies. It became codified as a slur for non-white children, particularly dark-skinned ones. Ugh, black kid back. During the 1800s in the Americas, Australia, and New Zealand. The first depiction was in the book Uncle Tom's Cabin in the character of Topsy. It is just another example of how the language of racism, white supremacy becomes universal. One thing I will say, those minstrel shows, we just had Kellen Hawksworth as a guest on the program, and he talked about how minstrel shows, that is the culture of white supremacy racism, and that's like a good 300 years of racist jokes and white people making fun of black people. I am sure that pickaninnies, that is a part of the lexicon of minstrel shows and then mocking black children and all of that. So I'm sure that was also a part of how that word, that language got taken around the world, where everybody pickaninny. Oh, yeah, we got it. 7. Black British were not passive recipients of the notion of black inferiority. The 1919 race riots and the deplorable living conditions of black seamen led to black physical resistance. Violent resistance to racism, white supremacy by non-white victims is often minimized or ignored completely by racist white supremacists. Absolutely and deliberately so. Often, even the non-violent resistance is ignored, erased. You all are just a bunch of lames, chumps, or what did I say? The help driving Miss Daisy. You all actually enjoy what they said, what he said. You heathens, we saved you. You all were running around naked with bones in your nose, acting like gorillas. We saved you. You're way better off. That's what they say. You ought to be, you should be happy with the rape, all of it, dark as you are. That's what they say. Resist. 8. When the future brought a decline in employment opportunities, a situation of job competition catalyzed the suppressed racial hostility. Again, I would just say, I don't think it was suppressed. If you're telling me You're exploiting their labor. You did not bring them over here and say, I'm going to pay you correctly. I'm going to give you proper paperwork, make you a citizen, all the good stuff. Not cram you in some Negro area where you only can live here. That's not, suppressing your racist behavior. Let's see. And you have a need. If Hitler hadn't smacked us around, we'd have left these niggers over in the jungles of Jamaica. Yes? Facts. Let's see. Racist white organizations went on a campaign of racial terror to intimidate blacks to repatriate to the colonies. British statesmen lobbying for and putting into law anti-immigration legislation. And it remains a constant refrain today throughout the global system of white supremacy racism. Get rid of the nigs and or dark people in general, especially the dark ones. And I thought the wording there was so important because they said white preservationist organizations, and I thought, wow, like that right there is the language to confirm. Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, white genetic annihilation. Why is, the presence of these dark people that, again, you needed to clean things up? Why is this seen as some sort of existential threat to our existence that we got to now have a white preservation effort? Like, what? What does it mean to be white? White genetic annihilation. Chapter 4, Black Power and the Birth of England's Black Bookshop Movement. 1. Malcolm X's visit to England in 1965 and Stokely Carmichael's visit in 1967, the U.S.-based Black Power movement began to take a hold in England. Finally, in 1968, in response to Enoch Powell's rebel rousing and the consolidation of white racist organizations, over 50 black organizations, its members, prosecuted via the Race Relations Act, local level community-based grassroots organizations came together to form self-reliant anti-racist networks of black power. I've often read and seen videos about well-known U.S.-based black people visiting the UK for speeches and interviews. However, I was unaware of how much these activists served as a catalyst for black organizations in the UK. I can only say, if you go back and listen to programs we've had of black people, really anywhere around the world, but I'd say particularly the UK, anywhere around the world, but especially the UK, almost every time they will say that, like, oh my goodness, black scholars in the U.S. In almost any generation, like Malcolm X, the Black Panthers, Ta-Nehisi Coates, any generation of them, Neely Fuller Jr., but it'll just be, oh my goodness, the black people in the U.S., they've done so much, and Muhammad Ali, reading about, what you guys did and your efforts and what you all have written and helped me get a better understanding and blah, blah, blah. Like, I've heard that for years. And matter of fact, but look. Doreen Lawrence, what's her book titled? And Still I Rise. Mad Dog 2020 and all. I will take that back because Maya Angelou did a lot of things that do not directly relate to Mogan David. So, right on. And I think Baroness Doreen Lawrence was constructively inspired by Maya Angelou. But I mean, hey, I'm sure I know there are black British poets and literary scholars and all the rest, but Maya Angelou. So, yeah, massive influence. I've heard that. We just heard that from Dr. Paul Thomas. He's in Norway, and he said the exact same thing. Migrated from the continent, said the exact same thing. Which I've said also for years, that is kind of sad, because if black people in the U.S. are leading the way in the so-called counter-racist effort, man, pitiful. 2. Black newspapers published during this time militantly confronted the oppressive forces waged against the black community. Maybe instead of using the word militantly, we should say published articles on counter-racism. Now, I will concede that latter one, published articles on counter-racism, that doesn't have the same, like when they say black newspapers published during this militantly confronted the oppressive force. Like, yeah, man, what is it? Nah. Greatly overstated. And I mean, hey, they got COINTELPRO and M16 and all this. They have militant white preservationist forces. We do not. Just call it something. Still appreciative, just like it doesn't sound as they got counter-racist. They published articles on counter-racism. It's just not, it doesn't sound as exciting. Like, man, that doesn't, militant, that, yeah, my black militant, I got my fist up, we gonna get Whitey, that, yeah, worthy of great pity. Anyway, we'll pause till we get to the rest of it about the education and, we did get that. Wait a minute, let me get one. The seeds of education battle began to bloom in the mid-1960s. In 1963, white parents in South Hall demanded separate classes for their children. Black children reportedly had problems, I love this, low educability and behavior problems, and were therefore holding back the progress of their white children. ESN. Educationally subhuman. My fault. That's not what I say. I'm sorry. Say educationally subnormal. You know they meant subhuman. In fact, that's what I would have just called it. You were saying we educationally subhuman. Man, I wish I had known about this term. I would have asked every one of our black UK guests, especially the privileged black males, did they stick that educationally subhuman label on you? And I would want them to, Gus, don't you call me it's subnormal. And I would even give the pause, like, well, all right, you could have fooled me. It's normal and human. Okay. Either way, did they put that educationally subhuman thing? I mean, subnormal. You said, my fault. They said you was subnormal? Just to see, like, how did they still do that? They still put that label on you at the UK school? Woo, man, come on. Interesting metaphor. Seed, bloom, talking about the education battle. Another example of the universality of the practice of racism, white supremacy, segregation, so-called, within schools, which is ubiquitous in the U.S. educational system and has gotten worse. I guess they call it special education in the U.S. See, they're too dumb to know. New York City professor who berated black students on hot mic in racist rant. Hey, they educationally subhuman over here too. See, you get too ignorant. See, and even the fella, he won. Was it not the Rhodes Scholarship, but he won one of those major Genius MacArthur grants. One of those. I think it might even been a Nobel Prize. It was one of those white awards. I'll look at the one, but John Watson. But he said the same thing. Like, we are wasting all this money, all these dark people on the continent, and I think he meant all of it, like Cairo to Cape Town, all of it. Like, all of these dark people are ignorant, they're stupid, genetics just, the brain computer just doesn't work like a white man and a white woman, and we should not be wasting money building schools and trying to get them educated and up to speed, because, I mean, they're niggers, come on. I don't know if he said all this before he won the Nobel Prize or after, but I had to go back and check. But I know Mr. Watson, who did recently die, he did win one of these big awards, and that was like his public stance. Like, come on, I've done the research. I'm a smart white man. Listen to me. I know what I'm talking about. Let's see. Folks who have commentary, feel free. I did say to the bot that I thought this book was, or this, not even a book, that this dissertation was boring, and the bot said, reading about how white people have used some of the same tactics to disrupt bookstores in the U.S. and the UK is not boring. True. Let's see. Go back, get some of my notes. Let's see. back to the beginning, or kind of the midpoint of, okay, chapter 3, midpoint. Let's see. We got some of this information, I guess, last week in terms of different ways that how they covered all areas of people activity in the UK to make sure that the children, old people, whatever field, whatever region, all get info that they are supposed to support the system of white supremacy racism and how they are supposed to view people classified as black. I don't know if it's because of Mr. or Dr. Beckles' focus, but it seems like most of the focus was on black people. How are you supposed to think about them? Now, maybe it was non-white people in total, but it did very much seem like black people. I'm sure they got, some jabs in about the Indian folks because they were still had that as a so-called colony and all the rest of it, so-called Asians as well. But it seemed very much black get back. He says, as anthropology, racism told British that black people were closer to apes. Get the planet of the apes, primate, obesity. That's just say same thing over and over. Even just talking about Dorothy Roberts' new book with her white anthropologist father, white German anthropologist father who had some of the exact same ideas. Let's see. Racism was in fact widely and persistently disseminated through school books and other texts prepared for the education or amusement of children. I thought that was so important. Entertain the racist. That's why I even said pickaninny, but amusement. White people enjoy practicing racism, and I think that is so important to be mindful of the minstrel shows, the racist jokes. This is not, they're confused, that they don't know. They enjoy practicing racism. You couldn't be amused if you don't understand racism. It says, widely circulated adventure stories. Africans are invariably described as ugly, animal-like, unintelligent, incompetent, in abstract thought, physically dirty, coward. This is one I think I got to about that coward. I said, all right, we got it. It's still a bunch of boastful, lazy. Hey, I got it. It almost felt like the dozens. Like, count dirty, big-eared, big-nosed, hey. I got it. The black people are not cool. Get them out of here. I got it. Well, I got a few more things. I got it. And it's underlined too, like, man, let's see. Page 90, he says, because of the structure of the education system in the British colonies, advanced degrees were sought in the motherland, meaning you come to England or what have you, see if you can go to one of the prestigious white universities so you can get a job or maybe stay there, send some money back to your family. I would just say that's not the structure of the education system. That is the structure of the system of white supremacy in the area of education. But I mean, let's see. He says that Benito Sylvan, I don't know if this is a white person or a non-white person. I'm going to assume that this is a non-white person because he said that they participated in one of these conferences, critiques those who created and propagated the discourses on black inferiority, saying that one, there are two detractors of the race. One, those who, incapable of seeking out the whys and wherefores of phenomena which astound their narrow minds, receive and transmit without even suspecting the gravity of what they are doing, unfortunate ideas which the apologists for slavery had such a great interest in propagating, and which they were able to make the ignorant masses accept without too much trouble. That just sounds like a lot of words to get to white people are ignorant. It's the white people, and I've said that's the way. Not all white people are racist, and the white people who do practice racism are ignorant. It would be very, especially in the context that we've been told, like, white people are inundated with this material from birth. This is not I don't understand. This is for amusement. We get all the goodies and such, but we enjoy practicing racism. They're not ignorant. They understand it. Matter of fact, had better understand it. You get in trouble if you do not. You don't know what a pickaninny is. What? What kind of white person are you? You haven't done on your... You get in trouble with other white people. So that would be one. He says the other group, those who, being in position to deflate the priori judgments commonly foisted upon people of color, are nevertheless restrained from doing so by stubborn racial chauvinism. These latter, instead of trying to stop it, deliberately go along with a prejudice which is compounded by the fact that it originates in errors which are being passed off as science. Now, this is another one where I think, so they're not ignorant, but they're just going along with it because of stubborn racial chauvinism? And going along with errors that are being passed off as science? Neither one of these is ignorance, and white people are dedicated to practicing white supremacy racism. Period. Like, just get to it. It's not that they're ignorant, that they don't understand, that they're dupes. Come on, we said a lot of that for a long time. The black man was not created to be the footstool for white power. Individuals classified as white would say, I beg to differ, while adjusting their feet on our neck. George Floyd. He quotes, this is talking about the 1900 Pan-African Conference, which I did not know about. I knew about the 1955 Bandung Conference. Malcolm X talked about that. Many other scholars, they've got even more recent books about that and everything. I did not know about the 1900 conference. They apparently have lots of books and different articles and such about all that. Maybe even have pictures from it. I don't know. But they said that a general association compromising the intellectual elite of civilized blacks would be established under the name Pan-African Association to centralize or control activities of all organizations, whether in independent countries or colonies, which have as their objective the protection and education of peoples of African origin. I thought this sounds very much like for-wallism, according to what Neely Fuller Jr. has written. And I think it would be very easy for white people to, one, now with all the technology, they wouldn't even have to get, spies or pay people to go and attend the meeting and, do whatever. They just have all their surveillance technology and just sit and listen. But it's so easy, and the record has shown it's so easy for white people to disrupt in a variety of ways. To disrupt, they can put all the members in jail, make false charges against all the members, see if they can get some of the members on drugs, see if they can get the members fighting with each other. Like, they got a billion different ways of disrupting anything that's going to be for-wallism, and especially this. I mean, it's so ambitious. It just seems like it would be very difficult. It's difficult to get black people who, live on the same street and went to school together to get them to agree on much of anything, much less counter-racism concepts. You talking about getting all of the people classified as black in the world to agree on anything, even what does it mean to be black? I just don't see that. Mr. Fuller said we really shouldn't be looking for a consensus, and it's not needed to replace white supremacy with justice, but I would have a very difficult, and the proof would be, do you see any evidence that they achieved this? Not that they ended racism, but that they get some sort of consensus amongst people classified as black. I do not see that anywhere. Not that I would expect it, but just, hindsight is 20/20, they say. Let's see. The article, for example, the London Times published the letter of a retired British colonel administrator blaming the riots on black men who were having affairs with white women. That full article, I already read a teaspoon from it. You can get the whole thing at the mixedmarriage.org project from the UK. Wow, what does it mean to be white? Sounds just like Strom Thurmond is stay away from the Negro. Let's see. They probably have books about those 19. That's even interesting because that's the same time that they were having the so-called Red Summer here in the U.S. So they're having the 1919 riots in the UK, and they're having Red Summer here, where like Chicago, Arkansas, I think Washington, D.C., George Carter G. Woodson was almost killed, unless my memory is bad, where they had riots in D.C. It was like all over the country. We talked about that, had authors on the program to discuss that in detail, but that's just, global system where you can see the symmetry in terms of what white people are doing all around the world. Let's see. He does talk about one of the ingredients that is necessary for a successful black press operation, like books or newspaper, whatever it is. One of the last things he mentions is the level of literacy of the black population. And that's what I said for right now. If they're saying that readership of black authors declined, hey, they have been saying literacy rates have been dropping in total. And then particularly for black people over the past 6 years or so, that might be beginning to show in our reading habits that were not very good to begin with. Let's see. He used the term, I remember I just referenced Dr. Kellen Hawksworth being a guest on the program. He talked his book Transoceanic Blackface, where he talks about that minstrel shows, that is not a U.S. cultural phenomenon, that is worldwide white culture and has been for at least the last 300 years. But he talks specifically about the term denigrate. He breaks down the etymology of that term, just superb scholarship. But it's right there in the word denigra. You are denigring me. You are literally, it's almost the etymology, you are blackening. That's how it came up in a blackface book. You are blackening me. And that's what he said. For the majority of schools, Africa's past is still either ignored, denigrated, or distorted. And I think that would still be true. This was published in 1995. I think that would still be true 30 years later. Easily true 30 years later. Maybe they include something nice about Nelson Mandela. Maybe. So Africa is reduced to an anthropological zoo. Again, Dorothy Roberts, white racist father. Beautiful illustration of this concept. And I think this is still the case today, where Africa is basically a zoo. That's how we think of it when we go on safari. The people there are animals, and that's kind of Africa. And exploitation for the minerals that we need and the cobalt and all that. Let's see. Oh, and that's what I said. He talks about your black people are just supposed to be smiling and loving and happy to serve, but to be the footstool of white power, that we're not upset about it. Just anything that you need me to adjust. Should I bend a little higher? Should I bend a little lower? What I need? What, to massage your feet while you're, that's, and all with a smile, all with a smile. Let's see. He says after World War II and the decline of British as an imperial power, all that was left of the colonial enterprise was the ideology of racial superiority. And that is underlined as though he wanted to emphasize that. So I make sure I read that one. I do think that is probably, and hey, that's really what all this is about. He starts talking about all of these white preservation leagues and white defense leagues as though they were under attack. Again, I can only say Dr. Welsing, brilliant white genetic annihilation. I mean, that the language of all of this, it can't be anything, it can't be interpreted in any other way. Just your presence here. I feel I need to defend myself. I am under attack. And then you're sleeping with all of our females and what have you. We got to preserve the white race. And now they got all the fertility issues and such added onto that now, so might be a resurgence of all this. Teddy Boy is number 2. Let's see. They should have books on these nigger hunting sprees in the UK, like inform folks about. So Global system. We don't just think that they have lynchings and Emmett Till over here. Global system. Negro hunting sprees in the UK. Nowhere to, because they present that like black people were tired of racism and so they went to London. Like, what? Nowhere to, imagine that. You flee from the U.S., Emmett Till and all that, and I'm terrified. I can't take it anymore. I got to get out of here. I'm going to go hang out in, London for a little while. Go visit Notting Hill. Looks nice and quaint. And what? Wait a minute. What? Whoa. What you mean? The nigger hunter? Whoa. Nowhere to run. Let's see. And then they got all this same thing that they're doing now, the immigration, build the wall, get them out of here, the Rivers of Blood speech. Like I said, we've played that for years here at the Crowd. Even when Enoch Powell says we've got to stop the breeding ground of the black British breeding. White, just so much of this gets to Area 8 and immediately gets to reproduction. This population being here and this fertile population being here is a threat to our very survival. Something must be done. Send them back, kill them, something must be done. Both, send them back and kill them, something must be done immediately. Oh yeah, he said the average Englishman was exposed to notions of race dominated by white supremacy. That suggests that there are notions of race, R-A-C-E, that have nothing to do with white supremacy racism. I contend that is false. Race is racism, white supremacy. There is no reason for racial classifications other than to practice white supremacy racism. If they're other side of the pond anywhere in the world, if you can think of a reason, something constructive and based on science, not foolishness, that where they serve a value, let me know. But these racial classifications are only for practicing white supremacy racism. That is the only reason they exist. So there's no way you can be exposed to notions of racism, or excuse me, there's no way you can be exposed to notions of race without being exposed to notions of white supremacy racism. It's not even possible. Let's see. Anything else? He says black British militants. I don't know what that is. And then he says, this is a quote talking about some of the so-called black power groups of the 1960s, that we were outside of mainstream society. Mr. Fuller cautions us about the use of the term society. And then we were not, or we were in the system of white supremacy racism. They were calling black people, saying that we came from the zoo, the animals and gorillas of Africa. I mean, you could just make it plain. What did they say? But we were within the system of white supremacy racism, not mainstream. What does that even mean? Mainstream society? Fuller has that word in the Word God specifically, and caution, great society. Society is not the same as system of white supremacy. And last thing I'll get in, we got the ESCN. I already said something about that. Yep. We'll get to second audio segment in chapter 4 of The Late Tragedy. We should keep that in mind the whole way as we read. Dr. Colin Anthony Beckles took his own life reportedly. And I mean, what an amazing scholar, counter-racist scholar. He went all over the world to do this work. He went to the UK, he went to Jamaica, came back here to the States and did all this work, talked to all these black, put the survey together and everything. What a tragedy. Dr. Colin Anthony Beckles, Pan-African Sites of Resistance, the Katherine Massey Book Club, Context of White Supremacy, audio segment number 2.
Bookshop motives and objectives. One of the oldest black radical publishers and bookshops in England is New Beacon Books. John LaRose and Dr. Sarah White established New Beacon Books by entering the publishing field in 1966. In an interview with Barbara Beese of Race Today magazine, they discussed their motives for establishing their resistance institution and how it related to Britain's dominant institutions' attempts to subordinate black African identity. One of the things that strikes you about a colonial society is that there is not only a lack of information, which is quite deliberate, in terms of the way colonial authorities see the population has to be kept away from information. There is also something else. There is a discontinuity. It happens in a colonial society because of the fact that the power to discontinue is there in the hands of the colonial authorities. So that each new generation comes to the colonial situation with its long history of struggles as though it is something new. In a society in which the population has the power to control its own life, that doesn't happen. So I saw publishing as a vehicle which gave an independent validation of one's own culture, history, politics, a sense of one's self to break the discontinuity. It can't be done totally because we are not in control of the schools. We don't have control of the media. We are not in control of everything that impinges on a person's life in the society. However, you can break some elements of that discontinuity and give people some sense of what is important, so that they get some sense of what they need to know to transform their lives. Beese, 1977. In that same interview with Race Today, LaRose discusses his motives for bookselling, which he started in March of 1967. This was a highly significant year in terms of a radical black bookselling and publishing because it coincided with the visit of Black Power activists from the United States and was the year of the emergence of the Caribbean Artist Movement, C.A.M. As you say, C.A.M. emerged around this time and was very active, holding public sessions every month and private sessions as well, late into the morning. A great number of works by West Indian writers were coming out at this time. Orlando Patterson, Earl Lovelace, Andrew Salke, Wilson Harris, Michael Anthony, and so on, which were subjects of discussion at C.A.M. meetings. There was a demand for these books because we were publishing then. People turned to us to do the supplying of the books. In September of 1967, C.A.M. had its first conference over 2 days at Kent State University, and New Beacon arranged to have a book exhibition there. We got stock from various publishers on a sale or return basis. That was the beginning of the bookselling side, and it grew gradually from there. After Stokely's visit, there was suddenly a big demand for books by him, Malcolm X, and Eldridge Cleaver that were coming out at this time. Endless meetings were taking place, and we used to go around to these meetings with the books. How? 1977. In March of 1994, I interviewed Jessica Huntley of Bogle Lavateur Press. She and her husband had a background in publishing based on their political activities in the Guyana. He was a postman, and he brought out a post office workers' journal. They were both involved in the political arena and assisted in the production of the party newspaper. He used to import some books from here, Britain, to Guyana, so we didn't come green to Britain. Book publishing was a natural process of things coming out of their political involvement in Guyana. We would get articles and run them off when they get them and circulate them. Huntley, 3/28/94. When asked about the motives for establishing Press and Bookshop in 1968, Jessica Huntley said she was initially inspired by the activities of Drum and Spear Bookshop, Press in the United States, a black press who had been publishing children's books with positive black images. After meeting with Drum and Spear in the United States, Huntley felt that it was time something was done to correct the racist images being propagated in England. According to Huntley, black images were either invisible, primitive, or they were the gollywog, the English black minstrel icon found on jam jars, school books, and commercial items across the nation. She reported that there were no books in the British education system which accurately depicted black history or cultural achievement. Teachers, students, and parents had access to nothing except the Eurocentric images propagated by government officials, the media, and the education system. Her press and books shop were established to correct this state of events. We did it because we saw the need. The teachers were saying they couldn't get resource materials, and there were no black books, no books about black people, and the kids were saying that they didn't know anything about their history. So for all those reasons that led John LaRose and ourselves as the early pioneers, and we wanted the literature to be exposed to our communities, and to let the system know that we write and we sing and we dance and we do everything else like everybody else. Huntley, 1994. Thus, when a friend of theirs, Walter Rodney, a Guyanese professor, was banned in 1968 because of his anti-racist lectures, this became a critical juncture. The Huntleys believed this to be another example of an attempt to keep black people educationally ignorant of their history. Huntley's Bogle Press rallied and published Rodney's work, Grounding with My Brothers. In 1972, Bogle Press published Rodney's most influential work, How Europe Had Underdeveloped Africa. In addition to these books, in 1970, Bernard Cords wrote his work, How the British Educational System Makes the West Indian Child Educationally Subnormal. This book was seen as the rallying point for the black education movement, as it detailed the British system's attempt to miseducate black children by making them educationally subnormal. Delivered at a CAM conference, it was felt that the information contained in that work desperately needed to be disseminated to the wider black community and the greater London community in general. Cooperating together, it was LaRose's New Beacon Press which published the book, and the Huntleys assisted in its circulation via the bookshops. Dada speaks on the importance of that work. Studies done on racism and the British education system, lots of studies done, one by Bernard Couard from Grenada. Even Inner London Education Authority did a number of studies on the subject. Bernard Couard's book suggests that the images our children produce of themselves were of Europeans. It's almost as if when they look in the mirror, what they saw was a European image, so they would reproduce their image in their schoolwork, and that was quite common, and it still is quite common in many ways, but it was more prevalent. Dada, 3/16/94. Social structure of the bookshops. As with LaRose and New Beacon, the Bogle bookshop itself began in her sitting room. Miss Huntley talks about the structure and interaction which went on at her bookshop house. LaRose didn't have a bookshop. He used to do it at home. They had his front room and we had ours. In the front room, too, when we lived in another part of Ealing, the borough. Our meeting room, our everything was happening in my bedroom. And then, when we moved here to larger premises, when we started out the bookshop, it was here, in this same living room, around 1971. Because there was a partition here, and John had given me a box of books to start me off. And all the books that we had, our personal books, we put them around shelves, around the floor, any way on top of everything. Huntley, 1994. Operating from their front rooms and using funds obtained from friends, the Huntleys of Bogle Books, like LaRose and Grassroots Bookshop, printed, sold, and distributed books, greeting cards, and posters from their house. Greeting cards and posters were pushed because they were inexpensive and directly, visually countered the invisible or negative images of black identity prominent throughout England at the time. Huntley. But anyway, We sold the posters, and I used to go to the streets and sell them and took them to parties. And then they did the first set of black greeting cards with positive black images. At the time, everything was white. Needed to give our children self-esteem, pride in themselves, anything that could have helped us, we did. Interviewer: when you say positive images, that's in contrast to negative black images? Huntley: no, there were none. There weren't any. There weren't any greeting cards on black people, unless some naked woman or some naked-breasted woman. Interviewer: or the gollywog image? Huntley: yes, that's what we had. Moreover, because of the small sizes of the flats and because many political meetings were being held in various parts of London during this time period, much of the book selling was done at the meetings themselves. LaRose in Race Today, 1977. As England's black struggle began to take new dimensions, so did the role of black bookshops. We turn now to examine these new dimensions. Section 2. This section reviews how bookshops became Pan-African sites of resistance. As integral parts of the Black Power struggle emerged in the 1960s and 1970s, certain black bookshops became Pan-African sites of resistance for the black British community. The wealth of black African textual information contained within their walls enabled the bookshops to become magnets for black activists and community members. Their multidimensionality aspects facilitate their new role as organizing centers for activists participating in England's black social movement. Black bookshop owners established or were linked integrally to community-based alternative schools. Finally, these bookshops networked with other politically active bookshops, exchanging resources across England and the diaspora. We turn to elaborate on these points. Black bookshops and the black education movement. As institutions, the significance that black bookshops had for the black education movement in England and its effect on the black community cannot be understated. Black bookshops such as Bogle, New Beacon, Grassroots, and Head Start held their meetings in the store, organizing demonstrations, and distributed the books to black sections of British youth, working class, teachers, and prisoners. New Beacon in particular was particularly important and had an enormous impact on the cultural and political life of the black movement in Britain in general, and on the education struggles of black parents in North London in particular. Below, LaRose of New Beacon Books discusses how their bookshop was specifically involved. From 1969 onwards, we were involved in an education struggle in this part of London, spearheaded by the North London West Indian Association, NLWIA. At their meeting, parents asked us about books, and we took book exhibitions along to the meetings. They would read everything about Malcolm X, George Jackson, Angela Davis, everything that was available. Writings about African politics, history, culture also interested them enormously. This was a section of the black working class that we reached through the bookshop. We were also able to reach sections of the black youth through the schools. Schools were looking for the kind of books that would retain the interest of black students. In fact, the very first discussion about black studies took place at our bookshop with a teacher from Tulsi Hill School, and we discussed how it could be organized. For the teachers, it was pacification. For us, it was introducing young people to the kind of material which they would not otherwise have been introduced to. We had to introduce them to the ideas of Angela Davis, Frederick Douglass, Equiano, Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, George Jackson, and so on. We recommended Eric Williams' Capitalism and Slavery for those who were interested in understanding in a simple way the nature of slavery and capitalism. Also, The Black Jacobins by C.L.R. James, as well as West Indian novels. and people asked us to send black books to people in prison. We saw the prison population as being important to reach. After reading Malcolm X, you must know the importance of reaching a prison population. Howe, 1977. The microstructure, multidimensionality. As institutions, England's black bookshops took on added political and cultural dimensions. They became community information centers, demonstration and organizing centers, legal advice centers, gathering places, as well as serving as archives for the black culture. As LaRose of New Beacon states, yes, the bookshop is not a bookshop in any commercial sense, although it obviously has to pay for itself. It is also a cultural and political center. Howe, 1977. For example, the Black People's Information Center bookshop was explicitly multidimensional, declaring itself as an advice/action center, offering general community advice and information about housing, legal, and education matters. As manager and owner of the Bogle Bookshop, Jessica Huntley comments on how her advisor dimension actually took on parenting aspects in her store. Kids come to you and say they have a problem with their parents, or could you come with me to see my mom because of something or another, or you're going to the courts. So it's not just the advice, it's literally things to do with day-to-day life, and it's always black people I raise up. Huntley, 1994. Other black bookshops were similarly multidimensional, but also used their bookshops specifically to recruit members for their respective political organization. Thus, the Black Liberation Front had their bookshop, the Grassroots Storefront, and the Black Panthers, under their new name, the Black Workers Movement, had their bookshop Unity Bookshops. Because of the multidimensionality of the bookshops and because of the text, a broad range of the black community would frequent the store. Black bookshops thus became an informal gathering place and meeting center. Moreover, once at the bookshop, it took on an organizing dimension. People frequenting the shops would be given information and connected to other political and cultural activities in which the bookshops were involved. Huntley comments on this aspect of the Bogle Bookshop. People would come. Teachers got to know, because don't forget other things were happening. Things in education about the underachievement of our kids. Because we were all involved in that, we were still on the streets picketing and demonstrating. Everything else was going on simultaneously. We were just the kind of people who were really involved. We really were all that energy. Then we used to have some school children coming in. Huntley, 3/38/94. Moreover, because of the broad range of people drawn to the store, the political nature of the participants, and the fact that there were absolutely no other places in the country where you could find such material, textual or human, the bookshops invariably became informal debate centers for England's black community. More than anything else, it was these debates which structured the microstructure of the store. Dada of Grassroots Bookshop discusses the daily life of the black bookshop's microstructure and its relationship to the production of African black identity. Whenever these organizations come together to plan the campaign, debate would ensue over which way is the correct way forward, and this debate would occur in bookshops as well, because in bookshops you'll have the Marxist-Leninists, the black nationalists, the Pan-Africanists meeting, and they'll put forward their ideas in the discussion. The concepts of Pan-Africanism being developed and spoken about and argued for and against. All sorts of arguments and discussions were being put together and developed basically. The meaning of African identity was part of the debate, going on all the time in the bookshops. And bookshops were ideal places for that because people could reach out and pick up books, booklets, information, and quote other people from across the world on that. So the concept of what it is to be black, is black a mental or a physical thing? Is it that you were black or that you were African? Those were the kinds of debates. And what is an African? I remember some discussions where we'd get black people coming in saying, well, the Boers of South Africa are African, and that ensuing almost violent debate. Dada 31694. Via Dada's historical memory, we can witness how in the bookshops, counter-hegemonic discourse was produced to challenge the racist representations of black identity propagated by the England's mainstream institutions. Moreover, we can also observe how the desperate need to find the correct black solution to the situation of white domination often led to heated debates among the black bookshop members. Finally, one notes that the content and nature of the debates about African identity occurred when black people would gather and meet at the bookshops, and that it was bookshop materials, textual or human, that catalyzed, even constituted the bookshop interactions during the late 1960s and early 1970s. Web of resistance, local, national, and international networks. Black bookshops were interconnected locally, nationally, and internationally. Below I discuss how these informal black bookshops connections came about and how they served to form a Pan-African web of resistance challenging racist representations in England, the United States, and the Caribbean. Locally, the black radical bookshops were strategically located across black communities in London. To the south was Grassroots and Unity in Brixton. To the west was Bogle and the Black People's Information Center, and to the north was New Beacon. Below, LaRose of New Beacon and Huntley of Bogle talk about how the political need to establish black information-generating institutions led to their organizing other activists to establish black bookshops. Interviewer: from what you are saying, you see bookselling as having an organizing and political function, particularly in terms of the struggles of the black community in your area of London. What advice do you give to people who may come with ideas of setting up a bookshop? LaRose: what we are doing and the way in which we have done it is not the normal way people have established bookshops in this country. When people come, we may suggest they begin to operate from their houses in the way that we had done. It has encouraged a lot of people and organizations. We were always determined that if these groups could understand what we did with the limited resources we had, it would make them know that it is not something beyond their capacity. It did in fact help with the establishment of other bookshops, which came subsequently in terms of knowledge, which we were willing to share with everybody who was willing to take it on seriously, as a serious activity with the same kind of interests and perspectives we had. Howe, 1977. In order to advance the movement, bookshops would help each other out by sharing material or extending credit. For instance, Huntley of Bogle talks about how materials were exchanged on credit with New Beacon. So that in a sense, then when they say that black people don't cooperate, it's not true. I mean, I know that for a fact. It's not true. It's not a total thing at all, 'cause John gave me these box of books and said whenever I could pay for them, I'd pay for them, which is a tremendous thing to do. But it was John that gave us the support, and we in turn, it was reciprocal. Because we were friends, we were comrades, we worked together, in education, in conferences. Huntley, 32894. In addition to the actual bookshops, the black community was linked to the Black Bookshop Network via the establishment of supplementary schools for black children. Some were directly attached to the bookshops, as in the case of New Beacon's George Padmore School. Other supplementary schools were attached to political organizations whose primary supplier was the black bookshops, such as the Marcus Garvey School, which was attached to the Black Liberation Front Party, whose members managed the Grassroots Bookshop. Sivanandan lists some of the supplementary schools and their sponsor. Black militant organizations, meanwhile, had begun to set up supplementary schools in the larger conurbations. In London alone, there was the Kwame Nkrumah School, Hackney black teachers, the Malcolm X Montessori programs, Ajoy-Gos, the George Padmore School, John LaRose and the Black Parents Movement, the South East London Summer School, BUFP, Black Unity and Freedom Party, Head Start, BLF, Black Liberation Front, and the Marcus Garvey School, BLF and others, the Free University for Black Studies for Older Students, Roy Siwa, Savandin, 1986. It can be assumed that all of the above were supplied directly or indirectly by the black bookshops, since they were the only institutions in London which carried the materials such schools would desire. In addition to these local and national connections, black bookshops in England had international connections with black bookshops in the United States of America who had similar political objectives. Their first U.S. connection was with the Washington, D.C.-based Drum and Spear bookshop. Drum and Spear did similar things. They were in a sense censoring books to make sure they had positive images in them. They influenced Bogle. We wanted to do something similar. Only carry books that would fulfill what we set about to achieve. Huntley, 329-94. As mentioned previously, Drum and Spear Bookshop in Washington, D.C. was the inspiration for Huntley's to start Bogle Press. Bogle Books modeled their initial stock on Drum and Spear and purchased items from them. Additionally, via Walter Rodney, whose banning from Jamaica was the store's original impetus for starting, other U.S. contacts were made. Walter Rodney and people in the States had a connection, and some of those people made contact with us around 1967. They wanted to cooperate with Bogle, since they were doing similar things. Huntley, 329-94. As Drum and Spear was staffed by former Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, or SNCC members, Bogle thus had ties to that organization. Moreover, after the demise of Drum and Spear, the U.S. connection continued. The Huntleys from Bogle Liberators Press would periodically fly from London specifically to purchase books from Liberation Bookshop in Harlem, New York. As Liberation Bookshops had many contacts with the New York Black Panthers, see the U.S. chapter, Bogle Books now potentially had formal U.S. connections with the Panthers. That the Black Panther movement had a dramatic impact in England is well known. Their influence is seen in the Black People's Information Center, modeled directly after the U.S. Panthers' information centers. Moreover, that the England-based Black Panthers ran a bookshop, Unity Bookshop, and they most likely had connections to the U.S. Panthers. New Beacon, Grassroots, and Head Start had similar U.S. connections. Moreover, as all of these bookshop owners were born in the Caribbean, they all had Caribbean connections as well. Shop managers and staff came from Guyana, Jamaica, Barbados, Antigua, and Trinidad. Many had backgrounds in island politics and were involved in political publishing back in their home countries. As such, books published and distributed from the black bookshops in England were distributed to the Caribbean as well via their former country political parties. Moreover, in the early stages when demand and the excitement were at its height, black bookshops such as Bogle were dedicated to the strategy of distributing positive messages about black life by any means necessary. This meant literally giving away thousands of books locally, nationally, and internationally. Of course they gave them away to the brothers and sisters, a group here, a group there, Canada, America, all over the place. Some people did pay us and some didn't. Most didn't. 2,000 copies went so quickly. They needed more, but didn't have any money. Began sending people invoices. They did get some money, and that's how they started. Huntley, 328.94. Finally, because of these international connections, the black bookshops became international magnets, drawing activists from all around the African diaspora who would come to buy text, lecture, pass on information, or to help organize in the struggle. Accordingly, international travelers came for information, books, lectures, and to help organize or participate in local and international events, and to interact with local activists, exchanging ideas, experiences, and memories. The bookshop became a real central point. It was one of the center points for the community. For example, when we had poetry readings at the bookshop, everybody who came to Britain came to that bookshop. We organized lectures for them, and in a small area, we just packed that place. Huntley, 318.94.
And that'll wrap us up for this week. We will resume next week, Chapter 4, Conclusions, where he'll kind of summarize everything that we learned about the UK experience, and then we will push off for the resistance to black bookstores in the UK, which I suspect will probably look very similar to what we read about in Char Adams Black-Owned, but we'll see. But that's for next week. The number 720-716-7300, the code 564943 pound. Press star 61 if you would like to participate. The email untiljustice@gmail.com. Let's see. I'll finish up email number 1, then see if folks have other emails. Thoughts on the portion we read. Let's see. Picking up number 4. John LaRose and Dr. Sarah White established New Beacon Books, 1966. They discuss their motives for one of the things that strikes you about a colonial society is that there is not only a lack of information, which is quite deliberate in terms of the way colonial authorities see the population has to be kept away from information. There is also something else. There is a discontinuity. I did not understand this distinction between withholding information and discontinuity. It seems as if a lack of information causes discontinuity. We didn't get the whole sentence there. Yeah, I would have got the rest of the sentence just to continue. Normally when I think of discontinuity, disconnected from, but the first was till that last sentence where we don't get the rest of it for full context. Yeah, I mean, that is absolutely, and in fact, I remember this because it struck me because it reminded me of Walter Rodney. He was talking about Jonestown and Guyana, and he said the exact same thing. He said that, and even on the micro with Jonestown specifically, he said that black people in Guyana knew less about what happened with the massacre, all these people, nearly 1,000 people dead, killed. People in Guyana knew less about it than people in London, Canada, the States, because the people were kept ignorant. And he said the exact same thing. System of white supremacy, so-called colonial environment. You keep the people ignorant and you restrict access to information. He said the newspapers there didn't even publish anything about Jonestown for a long period of time, that they were having to call people in Toronto, London, San Francisco, see if they could get any information on what happened. These are people who lived like a few miles down the road where the People's Temple was. But yeah, the first portion of it, total sense, that is exactly how the system operates, restrict access to information for non-white people. And even I can say, now I'd have to go back and get the exact sense about discontinuity, where it said later on, I think it's on the same page, where you have each generation, they start out to access information about racism, and they have to start from scratch. What is racism? And it's like, dang, this system of white supremacy has been here for centuries. We at least don't have that part down. Like, no, we didn't solve the problem, but we at least, okay, since this is what it is, this is, what it means to be classified as white. We at least got some rudimentary components. And Fuller had talked about the same thing, a discontinuity where you don't get to build on the scholarship of a Neely Fuller Jr. or Dr. Welsing. People have to come and start all over, brand new, within about 10, 20 years, and seeing this pattern happen consistently. Fuller wrote about that exactly. That is a discontinuity, and that's what happens when you restrict information, when you make it difficult to get Neely Fuller's book, or even you can engineer a society where black people do not, where in fact reading is antithetical to black culture. If you can engineer that, even better. But that's what I think. I could be wrong. 5. March of 1967. This was a highly significant year in terms of radical black book selling and publishing. Radical, ? I think that's the year they had lots of so-called riots here in the U.S. as well. Would have that all the time, really, but it was a lot of them that year, and I think the Kerner Report was issued. In the UK, a porter dies during student protests against Walter Adams, the new head of the London School of Economics, regarding his links with Ian Smith, racist regime in Rhodesia. I think that's later Zimbabwe. Mike Swango, E.R. Braithwaite, British novel, was made into a movie starring Sidney Poitier. To Sir with Love. Cowbell. 6. According to Huntley, black images were either invisible, primitive, or they were gollywog, the English black minstrel icon found on jam jars, school books, and commercial items across the nation. Gollywog is a fictional doll-like character created by the cartoonist author Florence Kate Upton. She was born in the U.S. but returned to England with her British mother at age 14. It first appeared in her children's book, Adventures of Two Dutch Dolls, in 1895. The character was described as a horrid sight, the blackest gnome. They don't have Negro gnomes, see that already, all of the gnomes I've seen are white. Remember we had that discussion, these gnomes look like Klansmen. They wouldn't say that if some of them look like, I don't know, Lupita Nyong'o, Will Smith. They wouldn't have said that. But I don't see no dark complected gnomes. There were many sequels which were very popular, nasty work by a young suspected racist. In the early 20th century, the character became very popular as a doll, books, toys, jewelry, perfume in the U.S., UK, Australia. Okay, we got whole world. We got it. Mars, Saturn, Gollywog. Yeah, we got it. And that's kind of delectable Negro too, because they said they put the Gollywog on the jam. You got can't have your peanut butter and your English muffin with jam. Gollywog strawberry jam. Come on. 7. Thus, when a friend of theirs, Walter Rodney, a Guyanese professor, was banned in 1968 because of his anti-racist lectures, this became a critical juncture. Huntley's Bogle Press published Rodney's work Grounding with My Brothers. In 1972, Bogle published How Europe Had Underdeveloped Africa. See, the C.O.W.S Book Club was Jonestown, ACIA medical experiment. Walter Rodney died in a mysterious bombing in 1981. I believe it might have been 1980, but I think it was 1981. I'll double check for the year, but yeah, either 81 or 80, but he was killed in a mysterious bombing. I'm not sure if anyone has been prosecuted for all of that. Could have been white involvement in that as well. How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, that was on the top 10 book for some of the books that we are supposed to read. I did point out, hey, Walter Rodney has been dead for about almost 50 years at this point. That was one of the patterns on those book lists, but that was one book mentioned. 8. 1970, Bernard Cordes wrote his work, How the British Educational System Makes the West Indian Child Educationally Subhuman. My fault, I said subnormal. It's almost as if when they look in the mirror, what they saw was a European image, so they would reproduce their image in their schoolwork, and that was quite common, and it still is quite common in many ways, but it was more prevalent. Born in 1944, Cord in Grenada, received college education in the U.S. and England. He went back to the motherland, studying sociology and economics, joined the Communist Party, and worked as a school teacher in London when he published the mentioned text, which is only 50 pages. In 1974, he returned to Grenada, where he engaged in 1983 in a bloodless coup and was temporarily part of the government headed by Maurice Bishop. He had Bishop arrested, and he took control of the government after Bishop was killed. He was eventually arrested in 1984 after the U.S. invasion of Grenada. Convicted, he eventually was released in 2007. 1. The Bogle Bookshop itself began in her sitting room. Mr. Fuller initially carried his work in a loose fashion in a suitcase until he met Dr. Welsing and the black orthopedic surgeon whose name I do not recall. I don't remember either, but that other portion is very accurate with immaculate handwriting. I was even thinking she was going to say the Ingenuity Room, where you, as opposed to having your living room to just sit and watch Netflix on your enormous television that is the size of 15 people, hey, Ingenuity Room said we're going to end up making a book club. Now, I would say, given what we have learned about the attacks on book clubs, especially if you decide we're not going to just do like what they call chick lit romance novels and that sort of thing, lots of, fiction. If you decide we're going to do serious work, and we might have the Man Knot on our shelves, we might have, ISIS papers and code book, we're going to be serious. Oh man, I don't know if I would want all that focused directly on my house, where people are coming in and COINTELPRO agents are coming in and all that. What books you got? Let me take pictures. And click like, let's see. At this is section 2. The section reviews how bookshops became Pan-African sites of resistance. 1. At their meeting, parents asked us about books, and we took exhibitions along to the meetings. They would read everything about Malcolm X, George Jackson, Angela Davis. The international recognition of these U.S.-based victims is evidence of why it is so important to neutralize them by the racist white supremacists. Absolutely. And again, I can only say you see dominance by, folks in the U.S. And by this point, they're having very public movements in South Africa. Nelson Mandela is a known name. By this point in the late 60s, early 70s, and Robert Sobukwe, some of the other folks from South Africa, Steve Biko, and many of these folks had books and what have you, and it's still very dominant in terms of U.S. Now, a lot of that is because of the system of white supremacy, and white dominance has been in this part of the world for so long, but either way, so many people, non-white people around the world have talked about how, hey, Angela Davis, George Jackson, Malcolm X, got to be, have got to read these folks. These folks even popped up on some of the reading lists where they said, you got to read Malcolm X pretty much on all of them. I will say, in terms of neutralizing, if you want to see the international recognition of these U.S.-based victims is evidenced by why it was so important to neutralize them by racist white supremacists. One of these victims is not like the other. I could take the obvious. One of them cannot go to the bathroom with the other two in public. I guess I'm going to take the other obvious. One of these victims is still alive. Now, if you want to talk about neutralizing, apparently they looked at these 3 victims and said 2 of them, they will have to be permanently neutralized. They did not come to that conclusion with one of these other victims. just pointing out facts. You can let me know if I've made an error in any way, shape, form, but I am pointing out a difference. If these three individuals were neutralized, they were not neutralized in the same way at all. At all. 2. We saw the prison population as being important to reach. After reading Malcolm X, you must know the importance of reaching a prison population. Book titles which have been variously banned in UK prisons. 48 Laws of Power, the Anarchist Cookbook. That should be banned for general population, much less the prisoners. Like, what do you need? Come on. American Psycho, Catcher in the Rye, 1984. That's curious. Why can you not read 1984 in prison? In UK prison? Why is I thought George Orwell is a national treasure? Wait a minute. Why can you not read? He doesn't advocate violence. He's just talking about words. And we read George. I told you we have the most subversive book club like ever. I had no idea. But anyway, we read 1984. I had no idea that you can't read that in prison. Wow. In UK prisons. Let's see. Why I'm no longer talking to white people. I can understand that one. The New Jim Crow, Cowbell. I can understand that one. So you've been publicly shamed. Between the World and Me, we read. That's another one where I kind of have a head scratch. Like, really? That's such a short book too. It took us 2 weeks. Bam, we were done. What it does mention Dylan Roof. I don't know if that, they would have to give me the breakdown on that because he doesn't advocate violence. He quotes James Baldwin, like, people that you are acceptable to talk about, allowed to talk about on racism. Like I couldn't even give a guess as to why no Ta-Nehisi Coates. Me and White Supremacy. I could see that one. That's a little more flagrant. I could see that one. I can even see American Psycho. We don't need no more killing, get on out of here. But 1984? What? You can't. Come on. They had to tell me, man, 1 and 1 is 2. That's everybody need that and leave a little Orwell in their life. Let's see. Microstructure, number 1. As institutions, England's black bookshops took an added political and cultural dimensions. They became community information centers, multi-dimensional advice, action center, offering general community advice and information about housing, legal and education matters. Kids come to you and say they have problems with their parents. Recruit members for their respective political organization. Organizing dimension. Informal debate centers for England's black community. Microstructure. Marxist, Leninist. Dr. Welsing would have such a smile. Pan-Africanism, meaning of Afro people, what it is to be black. Is black a mental or a physical thing? Is that you were black or that you were African? What is an African? We'd get black people coming in saying, well, the Boers of South Africa are African, and then ensuing almost violent debate constituted the bookshop interactions during the late 1960s and early 1970s. Interesting section. Many of the black bookstores in the U.S. also had this multi-dimensional aspect to them. The reference to almost violent debate suggests that some of these interactions between victims were not constructive. Imagine that. Sorry. I would not be surprised if some of the debates included name calling. Imagine that. You think Leroy and across the pond, you think that Coon, you don't know what you talking. You don't. Whew. Anyway, black culture. See Book Club, Char Adams Black-Owned. Web of Resistance. 1. Locally, the black radical bookshops. That word again. And I don't think we got a definition for radical in the last book either. Radical bookshops were strategically located across black communities in London. I would like more details on strategically located. Maybe easily accessible, places where they lived, I'm guessing, I don't know, lived, went to school, that sort of thing. Two, we were always determined that if these groups could understand that we did with the limited resources we had, it would make them know it is not something beyond their capacity. That's Miss Huntley, Jessica Huntley. We are always comparatively at a disadvantage when it comes to resources compared to racist white supremacists. That does not mean we should not try with what we have to produce justice. I think Thurgood Marshall, I think he said something close to that, I didn't have, when he was saying, reflect on my life and what I did, that I didn't have, a whole lot, smarts, intelligence, whatever. I did the best that I could with what I had to try to produce justice. Like, hey, that is right on. I said that Jesse Jackson, if you are classified as black, that's the best you can do. And then when you leave, you'll just have white people and non-white people. Wow, that Leroy, wow. That Jesse Jackson Sr., wow. That Madiba, we called him a Negro about 15,000 times. He just got on up and kept on trying to produce a little justice. That's about the best you can do. Let's see. Huntley of Bogle talks about how materials were exchanged on credit with New Beacon. So that, in a sense, then when they say that black people don't cooperate, it's not true. I mean, I know that for a fact. It's not true. It's not a total thing at all. Because John gave me these box of books and said whenever I could pay for them, I'd pay for them, which is a tremendous thing to do. The people most to blame for any lack of cooperation between victims are racist white supremacists. Facts. And I think we've read enough just in our 2 book club sections that apparently there's a lot of evidence of black people being helpful, sharing information, helping other black people get bookstores started and working together and all of that. So I think lots of evidence in what we've read in, I guess, this one book and one dissertation of black bookstore owners working together constructively. Let's see. 4, black militant organizations, meanwhile, had begun to set up supplementary schools in the larger co-urbanations, however you say it. Non-white victims reading and setting up schools in of itself is being militant in the global system of racism, white supremacy, which unfortunately is facts. Like, I really would not have thought, reading a book about racism is militant. Darn near just reading a book, period, is, radical for a black person. But yeah, I mean, they have put in tremendous effort, they being people classified as white, to see that we do not read, and especially don't read anything that might give you accurate information about racism. So, man, that is, wow, act of defiance. 5, in addition to these local and national connections, black bookshops in England had international connections with black bookshops in the United States of America who had similar political objectives. Their first U.S. connection was with the Washington, D.C. based Drum and Spear Bookshop, additionally via Walter Rodney, whose banning from Jamaica was the store's original impetus for starting. Bogle was dedicated the strategy of distributing positive messages about black life by any means necessary. This meant literally giving away thousands of books locally, nationally, and internationally. Some people did pay us and some didn't. Most didn't. Black bookshops became international magnets, drawing activists from all around the African diaspora who could come to buy text, lecture, pass on information, or help organize in the struggle. No, Mr. Fuller said he also despised that term, the struggle. I could find nothing to suggest that UK black bookstores were investigated, surveilled, and harassed by Scotland Yard or M16, in other words, a British equivalent to COINTELPRO. However, I cannot imagine that it did not occur in some fashion. I don't know. We'll have to see. Maybe some of that will come up next week in the white resistance portion of the text. Do they have some sort of corollary in the UK of how they were harassed or all that good stuff? We shall see. I don't know. Let's see. I'll nab a few of my notes from the second portion see if other folks have thoughts to share on what we have read thus far. Again, I did not know it was going to be so global with bookstores, and even with Walter Rodney being banned from Jamaica. What does that foreshadow about black bookstores in Jamaica? Where I don't even think it's that many of them, like the one or two or how many ever he's going to talk about. But, you know, what is their experience like? Let's see. A few of my notes from this second portion of the reading here. Drum and Spear, we heard quite a bit about them in Black-Owned. The lack of, okay, let me get that discontinuity. Okay, so it goes right into, there's also, so it's lack of information, which is quite deliberate in terms of the way colonial authorities see that population has to be kept away from information. There's also something else. There is a discontinuity. It happens in a colonial society because of the fact that the power to discontinue is there in the hands of the colonial authorities, so that each new generation comes to the colonial situation with its long history of struggles as though it is something new. In a society in which the population has the power to control its own life, that doesn't happen. That's what he means by discontinuity. That's exactly about what I thought, where you might wait. Hopefully this will not be the case. Hopefully we will produce justice. But you could easily have a situation where white people make it difficult to access Neely Fuller Jr.'s literature or Dr. Welsing's publications. And so people have to come and start all over definition for racism. What is this? It seems like white people might be fearing about their existence. We should come up with a theory for that, as opposed to, oh, this work has already been done. We can just build on this, add to it, make adjustments where we need to. It is very debilitating when you can just scrap all of that. And imagine if, we had to come up with and figure out algebra, physics. We had to start from scratch, as opposed to, oh, okay, they already got all the basics for this. We could just learn this and then add to it as we go. Very debilitating for the science of counter-racism. That's my interpretation of discontinuity. If someone has a better or more accurate one, please share. Let's see. We did get a misspelling of Stokely Carmichael's name, unfortunately. StockleY on bottom of 116. That is not correct. No C. E is in a different location as well, but whatever. They were inspired by Drum and Spear, which is the Washington, D.C. bookstore. We're going to hear more about Drum and Spear later on once he gets to the U.S. part of the story, but we already heard about them in Char Adams' book, Charles E. Cobb, and all these black folks from SNCC going to D.C. to start their bookstore right next to Howard University. We'll hear about them more later. But again, black people in the U.S. inspiring activity around the world. Let's see. Walter Rodney being banned from, it seems like, so he was banned from the UK, he was banned from Jamaica, and then he was bombed and killed. Like, man, Walter Rodney apparently was being accurate about white supremacy, racism, and upsetting a lot of powerful white people in the process. Even made time to come to the U.S. and talk about Jonestown in the midst of all this. Let's see. They say, Miss Huntley says that they didn't have any greeting cards with black images unless it was some naked woman or some naked-breasted woman. Sound like the type of thing that Dorothy Roberts' white daddy would have had in his collection that they probably burned. You can't embarrass us. We can't say that's no project. We got all that in there. Let's see. Alado Equiano, I do want to point out, we read about Alado Equiano he's mentioned in the grouping here that if they wanted information, we led him to the ideas of Angela Davis, Frederick Douglass, Olaudah Equiano, Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, George Jackson. Again, very, very heavy list of U.S. Figures. I guess if you want to put Jamaica in there for Marcus Garvey, okay, but he did get deported from here where he was doing his work. Anyway, Olaudah Equiano we read about in The Delectable Negro, and he talked about this young black boy being on this ship with these older white men, and he thinks that part of that experience was the homoeroticism. I mean, that's slaves. That's what you're supposed to be about. Let's see. C.L.R. James, Black Jacobin. C.L.R. James married, I believe, more than one white woman. Cow Bell. Let's see. Sharing constructive information about books, like, wow, super counter-racist activity. Anything else? I guess that might be it for this week, and then we'll pick up next week on the conclusion of chapter 4, and then we'll get to chapter 5. But kudos to the narrator. This is, I think it's challenging because he does have some like academic jargon in the text. I think he has that portion where it's like ethnological hierarchization, and a few others in there. It was like, oh man, yeah, I would prefer not to have to read this one. That way I could just sit back and learn, read, listen, enjoy the counter-racist material as we move around the globe studying the attacks on bookstores. And I guess we'll be alert to see, do they have some sort of COINTELPRO corollary in the UK to go about attacking black bookstores? We'll pay attention to that for next week. We'll be here Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, compensatory call-in, and then Sunday, I think, and then they move the clock, so I'm like betwixt and between, but we'll figure it out for Sunday because I think our guest is a different part of the world, so major time difference, and then they move the clock, so have to get my math correct for Sunday, but I think we're here Sunday as well. Any hoodles. Tomorrow, Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Sobriety would be best. I don't think you can do quality reading if you are sipping the Mad Dog 2020. Creator, we ask that you remind us, stop saying, not all white people are racist. We ask that you remind us, refrain from name-calling people classified as black. Even at the bookstore, when Leroy has gotten on your nerves and clearly doesn't know what he's talking about, even then, don't you call him no gollywog. It has been time. Replace white supremacy with justice immediately. Cal signing out. Thanks all for tuning in.
Nigga, you so brainwashed.
I'm a victim, brother.
Problem. You're a victim.
Yeah. I'm a victim of 400 years of conditioning.
Shut up.
The man has programmed my conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
Even my conditioning has been conditioned.